The world of football has changed immeasurably since the beginning of the 2000s. At the beginning of the millennium, France had the best team in the world, there were serious concerns surrounding clubs overspending, with potentially disastrous consequences, and the president of FIFA was a corrupt Swiss shyster who cozied up to dictators. Yeah, alright. I suppose not everything has changed. Some things have though. Back in 2000, there was no VAR, no social media, and no Liverpool, Manchester United or John Terry NFTs targeted at children, which plummeted in value by 97% in just 12 months. In some ways, they were happier times. But there was also no HITC Sevens or Alfie Potsama YouTube channels, so overall, the world of football is in a much better place now. This channel, seen as though it has just totally organically cropped up in conversation, is on the verge of hitting 600,000 subscribers. Meanwhile, my second channel, Alfie Potsama, has eclipsed 20,000 subscribers without me having uploaded anything yet. The plan is to hit 30,000 subs before I upload the first video on that channel, probably at the Euros in Germany, where I am spending an entire month from the middle of June to the middle of July, and have lots planned in terms of vlogs, documentaries, and maybe just some silliness. So if you want to help a brother out, head on over there and subscribe. I've heard that all of the cool kids are doing it, and they are being granted a lifetime of happiness and good fortune as a result. I will leave a link down in the video description. Over the last 12 months, yes, it has taken me a whole year, please don't judge, I have been taking a look at the best footballers in every position, the best managers, and ultimately the best 11 since Big Ben struck midnight on December 30th, 1999. During that roughly a quarter of a century, we have been blessed with one of the greatest national teams of all time, possibly the greatest ever club team, and some would argue, the two greatest players to have ever graced the game. I am referring, of course, to the England team at the 2014 World Cup, Sheffield United this season, and Daryl Janmaat and Leon Osman. In all seriousness, there has been quite the array of players over the last 24 years, so this wasn't an easy series to compile. The criteria, throughout, is the quality and quantity of a player's performances between 2000 and 2024, not their peak, natural ability, or anything else. So someone like Roberto Baggio, great though he was, stands no chance of featuring, having retired in 2004, and nor does Erling Haaland by virtue of being so young. Without further ado then, whose career fell perfectly within the specified time parameters, but who sadly failed to fulfill the immense expectations once set of him, and therefore doesn't feature, here is, in my opinion, though I would be extremely shocked if anyone disagreed with any of it, the best footballers in every position since 2000, starting with goalkeepers and ending with strikers, the best manager, and both the best squad and the best starting 11. 7th, Oliver Kahn. We start with a man who was very nearly too old to feature. Sorry, Oliver, but you know what I mean. Born in 1969, Kahn retired from international football in 2006 and from football as a whole in 2008, which means we're only analysing an 8-year window of his career between the ages of 30 and 38. For that reason, he very nearly missed out to several honourable mentions, who I will come to later on, but those 8 years included some of the greatest goalkeeping performances of all time. Absolutely terrifying, both to opposition forwards bearing down on his goal, and indeed to his own defenders if they ever got on the wrong side of him. Kahn was nicknamed Volcano by Bayern Munich fans, and he was prone to frequent eruptions. Renowned for his impatience and competitiveness, Kahn was once asked to participate in a charity penalty shootout involving schoolchildren, where, for every penalty scored, money would be donated. Kahn saved every single penalty, though it is worth noting since it's so frequently omitted from that story that he did apparently eventually donate £100,000 after turning a bunch of 9-year-olds into a collective sobbing mess. Kahn hit his peak either side of the millennium, named as the IFFHS World's Best Goalkeeper in 1999, 2001 and in 2002, and finishing third in Ballon d'Or voting in 2001 and 2002. His most memorable performances, for a global audience at least, came at the 2002 World Cup, where Kahn carried Germany all the way to the final and deservedly won the Golden Ball. undoubtedly, I think, a better goalkeeper than the two keepers up next. It's only the fact that Kahn's career was split roughly half and half between the 1990s and the 2000s that restricts him to a spot in 7. 6th, David De Gea. Possibly the most contentious inclusion in this 7, there are a couple of keepers in the honourable mentions in particular who could dislodge David De Gea once they've played as many games as him. De Gea gets a bit of a tough rap these days, left behind particularly in the Premier League by goalkeepers like Alisson and Ederson, who are better on the ball and in the pass than some of Manchester United's midfielders, but we ought not forget about the keeping the ball out of the net aspect of goalkeeping, you know, the old school bit, at which De Gea was better than just about anyone else at for about 4 seasons during the mid-2010s. No goalkeeper has made more PFA Team of the Year appearances than De Gea during the Premier League era, and no player, goalkeeper or otherwise, has won the Sir Matt Busby Player of the Year award more times than him either. When one thinks of some of the players to have played for Manchester United over the years, that is a pretty extraordinary record. The best goalkeeper that I've ever seen at saving shots with either his legs or feet, from 2012 to 2018, De Gea probably won Manchester United about 10 points a season compared with an average goalkeeper. Had he not suffered a loss of confidence and a decline beginning at the 2018 World Cup, I think, and not had a subpar international career more broadly, he would have threatened the podium places in this 7. But as things are, 6 seems reasonable in my mind at least. 5th, Thibaut Courtois. The youngest goalkeeper in this 7, by a couple of years, and also the tallest. I must admit that Thibaut Courtois has reached a level at Real Madrid that I never thought him capable of based upon his time at Chelsea and Atletico Madrid. Originally a left-back, surprisingly, I imagine that it was around about the time that Courtois began growing to be 6 foot 7 inches tall, which is over 2 meters, that his youth team Genk decided to convert him to playing in goal. That proved to be a very shrewd decision, not only because Courtois is tall enough to play in the NBA, but also because he has grown to have excellent reflexes and handling as well. He made his first team debut at only 16, which is freakish by goalkeeping standards, and the fact that he has been an undisputed number 1 since the age of 18 is the only reason why he is able to make this 7, still aged only 30. Following 3 seasons on loan at Atletico Madrid, where he twice won the La Liga Zamora trophy and once won the La Liga Goalkeeper of the Season award, Courtois did the unthinkable and dislodged Petr Cech at Chelsea. 4 seasons and several accolades later, most notably the Golden Glove at the 2018 World Cup, Real Madrid took advantage of Courtois having only 1 year left on his contract at Stamford Bridge and signed him for a measly £35 million. Despite a really tough and erratic debut campaign at the Bernabeu, where Courtois was often dropped and replaced by Keylor Navas, that has proved to be a brilliant piece of business. Arguably the best goalkeeper on the planet over the last 4 years, Courtois made the FIFA Pro World 11 in 2022 after conceding just 31 goals in La Liga and winning the Man of the Match award for a hard-fought clean sheet against Liverpool in the Champions League final. 4th, Petr Cech. 4th almost seems cruel on Petr Cech, but I think it's justified by the calibre of the 3 goalkeepers ahead of him. Chelsea didn't really need a goalkeeper when they signed Cech for just £7 million in the summer of 2004. Carlo Cudicini was an excellent goalkeeper and still only 30 years old, but Cech was a generational talent, whatever the hell that means, who dislodged him immediately in Jose Mourinho's side as a 22-year-old. Having made his name in his native Czech Republic, Cech spent the previous 2 seasons with Rennes before signing for the Blues, and he was at his very best, I would contest, unlike most goalkeepers, in his early to mid-20s, namely in his first 2 and a bit seasons at Chelsea, before fracturing his skull in a collision with Stephen Hunt, after which point he donned his trademark scrum cap. It was during that time that Cech conceded just 13 goals and kept a whopping 24 clean sheets in 35 Premier League games in what was actually his first season at Stamford Bridge and is arguably the best season that a Premier League goalkeeper has ever had. Despite his skull fracture, Cech was still world-class upon his return, continuing to star for Chelsea and later Arsenal for more than a decade. Cech is a top 15 or 20 goalkeeper of all time, and his entire career falls within 2000 to 2019, so fourth was pretty much the lowest that he could finish. But also the highest in my view, given the sheer star power of those up next. Third, Iker Casillas. The best goalkeeper in the world, I think, during just the 2000s, and excluding the 2010s or 2020s. When I was growing up and first started watching football, Iker Casillas was the best keeper on the planet. A graduate of the La Fabrica youth ranks, Casillas became Real Madrid's youngest goalkeeper of all time at the age of 18, when he started against Olympiacos in the Champions League in September 1999. That gives you some idea of how perfectly Casillas' career, like Cech's, falls within our parameters. And after breaking into the Real Madrid first team, despite his tender age, Casillas would not give up that number one shirt. I think it is maybe a little bit underestimated by some, quite how remarkable it is that Casillas became the certified number one at the biggest club in world football at the age of 18, and didn't relinquish that shirt for the next 16 years. At his best, Casillas' reflexes and ability in one-on-one situations were probably the best of any keeper during my lifetime, and though his Real Madrid departure felt premature in 2015, when Casillas had just turned 34 and departed for Porto, Raul is the only man to have made more than Casillas' 725 appearances in a Real Madrid shirt. Casillas also won 167 caps for Spain, and he is possibly the most decorated goalkeeper of all time. Along with Didier Deschamps and Franz Beckenbauer, Casillas is one of only 3 men to have lifted the Champions League, the Euros, and the World Cup trophies as a captain, and his individual accolades are just as, if not even more impressive. Casillas has the most FIFA Pro World 11 inclusions out of any goalkeeper, 5, the joint most IFFHS World Best Goalkeeper Awards, also 5, and the most UEFA Team of the Year inclusions, 6. When you put it all like that, he does seem pretty hard done by only to come third, but I think that I can justify it. Second, Manuel Neuer. There will be plenty of people who feel as though Manuel Neuer should top this 7, and I've got a lot of sympathy for that view. Undoubtedly, I would argue, the most influential goalkeeper in this 7, Neuer was by no means the first ball-playing goalkeeper, or the first to venture far outside of his 6-yard, and indeed, sometimes his box entirely, but his effectiveness when doing so ushered in a new era for goalkeeping. It's quite possible that the rise of sweeper keepers in the 21st century and the importance of being good with the ball at your feet would have happened without Neuer, given broader shifts towards teams playing the ball out from the back, but I'm extremely sceptical that that transition would have been as quick without him. Born in Gelsenkirchen shortly before German reunification, Neuer made his name at Schalke, where it was evident, even in his breakout 2006-07 campaign, that he was something quite special. Like all great German players then, Neuer signed for Bayern Munich, where he has since spent the last 11 years, winning the Bundesliga title in all but his debut campaign. An enormous presence who makes spectacular saves look simple, at his absolute peak, there was a sense of invincibility about Neuer, which only the very best goalkeepers possess, and which starts to sow seeds of doubt into the minds of centre-forwards. Like Casillas, Neuer has won it all, with the exception of the Euros, but he came the closest of any keeper to winning the Ballon d'Or since Lev Yashin did so in 1963, when he finished third behind only Messi and Ronaldo after winning the World Cup in 2014. 0. Honourable mentions. I decided to stick the honourable mentions between first and second place to build anticipation, as is tradition on this channel, even though most of you probably know what to expect in top spot. The goalkeepers who I felt were most unfortunate to miss out were Edwin van der Sar, who actually played for a few years longer than Oliver Kahn post-2000 until 2011, but didn't quite have Kahn's truly mesmerising early 2000s peak, Jan Oblak, who I think has probably been the most consistent goalkeeper on the planet since signing for Atletico Madrid, whilst being routinely exceptional and would surely feature in just a few years' time, and Victor Valdez, who probably came the closest to actually featuring, perennially underrated by virtue of playing second fiddle to Iker Casillas for so long with Spain, but a marvellous goalkeeper, whose more than 500 appearances during the most successful period in the history of FC Barcelona so often gets overlooked. Elsewhere, the likes of Dida, Julio Cesar, Alisson, Keylor Navas, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Igor Akinfeev, Hugo Lloris, and if for no other reason than his tournament performances, Guillermo Ochoa all also made my shortlist, but just missed out for a variety of different reasons. Alisson, as with Oblak, could well feature in the future, but he only made his professional debut less than a decade ago. Right, honourable mentions done and dusted, and about 40% of you now fuming that at least one of those 11 goalkeepers didn't make my 7, here is your top spot, and therefore, unequivocally, in what is doubtless the crowning achievement of their entire careers, the greatest goalkeeper since 2000, as named by me. Drumroll please. First, Gianluigi Buffon. Yes, to the eternal shock of absolutely no one, the man who takes top spot is none other than Gianluigi Buffon. And no, it's not just because we've met and are such close friends. Buffon, in addition to being a huge fan of HITC Sevens, is also rather good at goalkeeping. Admittedly, the first one is more important, and says more about his character, but it's the second that justifies his spot in first. What makes Buffon's crown even more impressive is the fact that he is the second oldest goalkeeper in this 7, behind only Oliver Kahn, and he was already a world-class goalkeeper, Italy's number 1, and had played over 150 games for Parma before the year 2000. Despite all of that, Buffon is still playing now, age 45, back at Parma, and back wearing the number 1 shirt. It is longevity which is unmatched by any other all-time great of his generation, and given his intention to keep playing for at least another season, it looks almost certain that Buffon will surpass 1,000 appearances at club level at some stage, having smashed that landmark long ago when one counts international appearances as well. Buffon spent his best years at Juventus, who signed him for a world record-breaking fee for a goalkeeper of €52 million in 2001, a record which wouldn't be broken until 2017. In spite of that fact, Buffon still proved to be a bargain. Over the next 17 years, he played 650 games for Juve, sticking by the club even when they were relegated to Serie B in 2006, despite being widely regarded as the best goalkeeper in the world at that time, and having just won the World Cup. Casillas might have had better reflexes and more flair, and Neuer better distribution, but what made Buffon so special, and continues to, I suppose, is his lack of any distinct weakness, his positioning, and his ability to judge the flight of a ball and communicate with his defenders, all of which have allowed him to keep playing at the highest level well into his 40s. Buffon won the Serie A Goalkeeper of the Year award an extraordinary 13 times, which is more than twice as many as every other goalkeeper combined during that time, and he has finished in the top 3 of the IFFHS World's Best Goalkeeper Award rankings on 14 occasions. There is a case to be made that Buffon is the greatest goalkeeper of all time. Certainly, I would put him among my top 3, and even Manuel Neuer, despite his entire career coming post-2000, unlike Buffon's, I don't think is capable of knocking him off top spot for the 21st century. 7th, Maicon. As thrilling as it was to watch a young Gareth Bale brutally violate Maicon over 2 legs at Tottenham, and to witness a star being born, it is remarkable, particularly here in England, how much damage 180 minutes of football did to the Brazilian's reputation. Prior to that, you may recall, and the reason why Bale's performance was considered to be so spectacular was because Maicon was universally regarded as being one of the best fullbacks on the planet. A tall and athletic attacking fullback who was so tough to contain down the right flank, For 3 years during his prime, he started ahead of Dani Alves for Brazil, despite the pair of them being almost exactly the same age. That doesn't happen unless you are seriously special, and though he lacked Alves' longevity, which few can match in fairness, that is exactly what Maicon was. The great nephew of Internacional and Brazil legend Valdemiro, Maicon began his career at Cruzeiro, going on to star for Monaco, Inter Milan, and AS Roma. His best years undoubtedly came at Inter, where Maicon spent 6 seasons, made 249 appearances, won 4 Serie A titles, and a UEFA Champions League. Named in the UEFA and FIFA World 11s in 2010, as well as winning the UEFA Club Defender of the Year award, only a slightly early decline, beginning when Maicon was about 30 or 31, prevents him from ranking any higher in this 7. 6th, Kyle Walker. One of only a couple of active right-backs in this 7, Kyle Walker is a player who is in some ways difficult to assess. At Tottenham, despite twice making the PFA Team of the Year and being heralded as one of the best right-backs in the Premier League, I always felt that he was a bit too hot-headed at times, slightly rash, and over-reliant on his remarkable recovery pace. There is the occasional glimpse of that still at Manchester City, but by and large, Walker has become a much more refined and much less error-prone player at the Etihad. One of the fastest players I would contest, possibly in the entire history of the sport. The highest praise of Walker is perhaps how much opposition forwards hate playing against him. Many of the world's best forwards, including Neymar, have expressed that openly, describing him as one of, or indeed their toughest opponent, but you just have to watch the way in which they alter their games against him to see that bear out in reality. Walker is the only fullback that I've ever seen who Kylian Mbappe will no longer look to knock the ball past and beat in a foot race because he has tried that and he knows how it ends. Soon to turn 33, it will be interesting to see when Walker's pace starts to desert him, as we haven't seen that yet, and how or if he is able to adapt his game. Even if his career was to end tomorrow, though, I think that he's good value for a spot in 6, based upon the more than 600 games that he has already played for both club and country, and all that he has achieved in that time. 5th, Cafu. Alright, put your pitchforks away for now and hear me out. Cafu is, quite possibly, the best right-back in this 7, and I would argue a top 10 right-back of all time. He is also 52 years old though, which means that his professional career began in 1990, a full 10 years before the start of the relevant period, and despite outstanding longevity, his Brazil career still ended in 2006 and his club career in 2008. In fact, given that Cafu turned 30 in the year 2000, he has done remarkably well to make this 7 at all. He does so because he aged like a fine wine, and even into his mid to late 30s, he still had more energy, enthusiasm, and stamina than most players do in their prime. Brazil's most capped player of all time, having made 142 appearances for the Seleção, Cafu was the last Brazilian to lift the World Cup, having captained the country to glory in 2002. His only clubs, post-2000, were Roma and AC Milan, but Cafu won Serie A titles with both of them, a Champions League with Milan, and he made the FIFA Pro World 11 in 2005 at the grand old age of 35. 4th, Gianluca Zambrotta. An outstanding two-footed attacking fullback who was as comfortable at left-back as he was at right-back, or indeed at wing-back, Gianluca Zambrotta perhaps doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves outside of Italy, but Italians know a quality defender when they see one. Zambrotta's downplayed legacy might have something to do with the fact that, at his only club outside of Italy, namely Barcelona, he was fairly underwhelming, but 2 seasons does not a footballer make. At his best, which was probably with Juventus, Zambrotta was quick, tenacious, defensively sound, and a constant attacking threat with his energy and deliveries into the box. He played a fair bit of football before 2000, about 150 appearances for Como, Bari and Juventus, plus 3 caps for Italy, but he was at his best in the early to mid-2000s, playing a key role in Italy's 2006 World Cup win, and even after a slightly underwhelming stint at Barca, he went on to spend 4 seasons at AC Milan, lifting a 3rd Serie A title, before retiring in 2012. 3rd, Javier Zanetti. One of the greatest right-backs of all time, as with Cafu, it is only age that prevents Zanetti from ranking even higher in this 7. Zanetti made his club debut in 1992 and his international debut in 1994, and he turned 27 in the year 2000, so once again, that ought to have made it tough for him even to feature in a 7 of this ilk, but Zanetti's longevity is the stuff of legend. He continued to play and star at the highest level, with Inter Milan until 2014, just a couple of months shy of his 41st birthday. In fact, the 1,115 official career appearances that Zanetti made is the 14th most in the entire history of the sport, and the 6th most among outfield players. No outfield player with more appearances than Zanetti played exclusively in the world's most competitive and prestigious top flights. A 3-club man, Zanetti began his career with Talleres before moving on to Banfield in the 1990s, but he is best associated with Inter Milan. Brought to the San Siro in 1995, Zanetti went on to spend 19 years with the club, during which time he played under 19 different coaches. A tireless, complete, and supremely intelligent fullback, Zanetti was dogged in his defensive duties, remarkably level-headed, he was only sent off twice in 19 years at Inter Milan, and a brilliant ball carrier. As both a modern or traditional fullback, and Zanetti bridged both of those eras, there was next to nothing that he couldn't do. His intelligence allowed him to play virtually anywhere on the pitch, and in his later years, due to a combination of his pace beginning to wane and the emergence of the aforementioned Maicon, Zanetti was played increasingly in central and holding midfield. Nonetheless, right-back was his primary position, and the one in which he deservedly features in this series. Second, Dani Alves. There was next to nothing to split the top 2 in this 7, who I would imagine about half of you were able to guess by this point, despite them being very different players. In the end, Alves just dropped into second for me, despite being by far the most impressive offensive fullback since 2000, over that period as a whole. A classic attacking and adventurous Brazilian fullback, during his breakout season at Bahia and 6 seasons with Sevilla, Alves became the most expensive right-back of all time and Barcelona's 3rd most expensive signing of all time when he joined the club in 2008. At Barcelona, Alves transformed into something altogether much more special, forming a spectacular and routinely unplayable relationship with Lionel Messi on Barcelona's right flank. Following just shy of 400 appearances at the Camp Nou, Alves joined Juventus, PSG, Sao Paulo, returned to Barca to complete that milestone, and now plays for Pumas in Mexico, aged 40. In total, Alves has made over 1,000 appearances at club and international level, and counting, and his peak is firmly among the finest of any player in the history of his position. He is also one of the most decorated footballers of all time, and the most decorated of the modern era, having won 42 trophies in total, perhaps most notably his 3 Champions Leagues. An 8-time FIFPro World 11 inclusion, only Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Sergio Ramos and Andres Iniesta have featured more times than him. It would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that in January 2023, Alves was arrested and charged with sexual assault by Catalan police. Alves is accused of raping a woman in a nightclub toilet, who he initially claimed never to have met, until surveillance footage disproved that claim, then claimed that he defecated in the same cubicle as her for 15 minutes, but that nothing sexual had occurred, until that was also disproven by his semen being found on the toilet floor. He then claimed that she had just performed fellatio on him, which was also disproven by semen samples, and in his latest testimony, he reportedly changed his story yet again to claim that he did have sexual intercourse with the woman, but that it was consensual, and that he only lied in an attempt to save his marriage. So, an outstanding fullback, but a pretty vile human being. 0. Honourable mentions. It wouldn't be a HITC Sevens greatest series without something as bleak as what I just talked about, and a set of honourable mentions sandwiched between first and second place. The first right back that I want to shout out is one that I mentioned in the introduction, Gary Neville, who was a fantastic fullback, but was really at his best in the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s in my view, and therefore misses out by virtue of the time parameters more so than anything else. He was still probably the closest right back to featuring, and could easily have stolen in ahead of Maicon. Pablo Zabaleta and Branislav Ivanovic are two more exceptional Premier League right-backs who did play all of their football post-2000, and there also wasn't much to split them and Maicon. Meanwhile, Dani Carvajal can consider himself unfortunate to miss out, and would probably leapfrog Maicon if I made this video in just a couple of years' time. And last but not least, I think that Lukasz Piszczek is a criminally underrated right-back who was unerringly consistent for over a decade in the Bundesliga and is still playing now in the third tier of Polish football. Just a quick word also for Lilian Thuram, who would have made this 7, though only in 7th, just ahead of Maicon given that he retired in 2008, had I classified him as a right-back. But he played more games at centre-back than at right-back post-2000, and is therefore eligible for the centre-back video, which will be up next in this series instead. Another great reason to subscribe, of course, to both. Enough prevaricating though, it is time for your bloody top spot. Have you guessed it yet? First, Philipp Lahm. In top spot, it is of course Philipp Lahm, and how could it be anyone else? A faultless fullback who could do it all. You could count the number of glaring mistakes that Philipp Lahm made over the course of his entire career on a single hand. Born and raised in Munich, Lahm spent his entire career in Bavaria, but for 2 seasons on loan at Stuttgart, where he honed his skills. Due to necessity, Lahm spent his early years at Bayern playing as a left-back, and his later years, reminiscent of Joshua Kimmich after him, playing in central or holding midfield. The bulk of his career was spent at right-back though, where Lahm was, for roughly a decade, consistently one of the 2 or 3 best right-backs in the world. Nicknamed the Magic Dwarf by Bayern fans, Lahm was clever, athletic, and technically superb. Pep Guardiola once called him perhaps the most intelligent player that he had ever coached, which is saying something when one looks down the list of players that Guardiola has had under him over the years. Lahm doesn't have anywhere near as many FIFA Pro World 11 inclusions as Alves, just 2, but that's because he was always less flashy, eye-catching, and flamboyant. He did the job though, expertly and with little fanfare, and almost never dropped a performance worse than an 8 out of 10. A truly sensational footballer, and not yet very credibly accused of rape, the latter admittedly being a low bar, but ultimately, I think that Lahm is the right choice in top spot. 7th, Fabio Cannavaro. The only centre-back since 2000 to have won the Ballon d'Or, and one of only 3 defenders to have ever won the prestigious award, there will inevitably be someone in the comments who claims that means that he should be first. That isn't the criteria, of course. I promise you there will still be someone, but Cannavaro was indeed a magnificent centre-back. The shortest inclusion in this 7, Cannavaro stood at just 5 feet and 9 inches tall, and still does, I presume, but what he lacked in height, he more than made up for in terms of his strength and intelligence. Deceptively quick, Cannavaro was studious in researching his opponents, brilliant at interrupting a forward's flow, and a master at reading the game. There can be no doubt that the 2006 World Cup was his magnum opus, where he inspired an immensely talented but largely unfancied Italy team, following the Calciopoli scandal, to their 4th World Cup crown. In light of the Calciopoli scandal, Cannavaro, then of Juventus and formerly of Napoli, Parma and Inter Milan, followed Fabio Capello to Real Madrid. 3 years later he returned to Juve, and a year after that, he retired in the United Arab Emirates. Cannavaro's immense peak, which was as impressive as almost anyone else's in this 7, twinned with his sublime all-round skill set, secured him a spot in this 7. But the fact that his first 7 years of football fall outside of our post-2000 remit, and the fact that he retired in 2011, means that he could only ever be our opening inclusion. 6th, John Terry. One of the greatest centre-backs in terms of the pure defensive fundamentals in the entire history of the sport, John Terry appeared to have been born with a defensive sixth sense and reading of the game, that most centre-backs don't fully hone until they are into their mid to late 20s, if ever at all. That made him an immediate star man for Chelsea just before the start of the 2000s, where he learnt from one of the very best in the business in the form of his centre-back partner, Marcel Desailly. When Desailly left Chelsea in 2004, though Terry was still aged only 23, incoming Chelsea manager Jose Mourinho appointed him as the club's new captain. Terry captained Chelsea for the next 13 years, during which time he lifted 16 trophies, sometimes even when he hadn't even played in the final. In addition to his masterful positioning and reading of the game, Terry was big, strong, formidable in the air, in both boxes, and an inspirational figure for many in the Chelsea dressing room. Though it would seem a stretch to call Terry a ball-playing centre-back, as it was off the ball where he really flourished, he was also more than capable of playing pinpoint diagonal balls out wide to either flank. Terry made the FIFA Pro World 11 on 5 occasions, which is the second most of any centre-back, and the fact that his career, from 1998 to 2018, falls almost entirely within our time jurisdiction, meant that he was always likely to feature. His centre-back partnership with Ricardo Carvalho is probably the most defensively solid in the history of the Premier League, and his Portuguese partner in crime also made the shortlist for this 7, but we will come to the honourable mentions later on. 5th, Rio Ferdinand. Rio Ferdinand is an idiot. I'm sorry, but someone had to say it. So too is John Terry, if we are being entirely honest, but that doesn't change the fact that both were supremely talented centre-backs. I mean, no one suggested that it did, Alfie, but you've just called them idiots for no reason. Anyway, having these two so close together in this 7 is inevitably going to lead to debates and some controversy in the comments, but there is no doubt in my mind at least that Rio Ferdinand was, at the very least, a more gifted footballer than his longtime England teammate and, well, it might be pushing it to call it comrade. In fact, despite being one of the most decorated English footballers of all time, I would go as far as to say that, with his talent, Ferdinand arguably ought to have made the top 3 in this 7. In his defence, his career did begin in 1996, with his breakout campaign coming in the 1997-98 season, which is 3 full years of football that we are forced to disregard. And they are 3 years, it should be said, aged 18 to 21, in which Ferdinand was already a full England international. Ferdinand was blessed in more ways than one. A tremendous athlete, he was big, strong and fast. Brilliant at organising a back line, he wasn't hot-headed, and positionally, he was very rarely found out. On the ball, he was England's best centre-back for at least the last 30 years, capable of striding out from defence, beating players, and picking a pass. Ferdinand made more appearances in the PFA Team of the Year, 6, than any other Premier League centre-back, and I found it near enough impossible to split him and the man up next. 4th, Thiago Silva. This might be a controversial view, partly due to recency bias I suspect, but I actually think that Rio Ferdinand was probably a better centre-back than Thiago Silva. If I could only take one of them at their absolute peak, I'd pick Ferdinand, because there was virtually nothing that he couldn't do. The reason why Thiago Silva features one place ahead of Ferdinand then, in 4th, are twofold. Firstly, he's much younger, which means that his entire career falls within the relevant time period since 2000, and secondly, his longevity. Every player in this 7 had impressive longevity, otherwise they wouldn't have featured, but none were as impressive at 38 years of age as Thiago Silva is right now. Just 1 month into next season, he'll turn 39, and it would take a brave man to bet against him playing into his 40s. Remarkably, Silva actually retired from football in 2005 as a 21-year-old, having almost died of a nasty bout of tuberculosis whilst contracted to Dinamo Moscow. Silva had just had a failed stint at Porto and never played for Dinamo, but his mother convinced him to give football a second chance, and the rest, as they say, is history. Silva's career was reborn with Fluminense before he returned to Europe with AC Milan. In 2012, he joined PSG, where he would spend the next 8 seasons, becoming one of the club's all-time record appearance holders. They're quite a new club. When Chelsea signed Silva, already into his late 30s, in the summer of 2020, few could have anticipated how key a role and just how much football he would play for them, and last season, he won both the Chelsea Player of the Year and Chelsea Players Player of the Year awards, though, there wasn't that much competition. A superb all-rounder, Silva was once very and is still relatively quick. He is a remarkable athlete, dogged in his defensive duties, a born leader, and incredibly composed on the ball. It speaks of the calibre of the centre-backs up next that he only takes 4th place. Third, Alessandro Nesta. If we consider Paolo Maldini to be a left-back, which we are for the purposes of this series, and acknowledge that Franco Baresi retired not long after I was born, I would say Alessandro Nesta is the single most gifted or talented centre-back during my lifetime. In fact, even including Baresi, I think that claim could still be made. Among the most aesthetically pure centre-backs ever to have played the game, Nesta made defending look like it was second nature. He was quick and hellishly strong, having started out as a fullback, but he rarely required his athleticism to get him out of trouble. Instead, Nesta dispossessed his opponents with all of the subtlety of a master pickpocket, sometimes without them even realising what had actually happened. Nesta could be tenacious and aggressive in the tackle when he wanted, formidable in the air, as graceful as a ballerina with the ball at his feet, and as accurate as most playmakers in the pass. In short then, there was nothing that he couldn't do, and there was also virtually nothing that he didn't win, whether that be Serie A, the Champions League, or the World Cup. So why doesn't Nesta take top spot? Well, that's solely because he began his career in 1994, so he had 6 years of football outside of our remit, and from the mid-2000s onwards, he suffered chronic injury problems. Nonetheless, Nesta didn't actually retire until the age of 38. He had about 11 years of vintage football post-2000, and his peak was as good as anyone's. So third it is. Second, Carlos Puyol. Only a fool would suggest that Carlos Puyol was as talented as Alessandro Nesta, but there are several key factors in relation to this series that count in his favour. For a start, he broke into the Barcelona first team in the 1999-2000 season, enjoying an excellent debut campaign right at the beginning of our relevant time frame. Then there's the fact that, unlike Nesta, he suffered very few serious injuries. The 2010-11 season was Puyol's most injury-play campaign, barring his final season, and he still played 27 times as Barcelona won the treble. The end result is that Puyol played a lot more football at the very highest level post-2000, and whilst he might not have been as graceful as Alessandro Nesta, we are still talking about a generational defender. Primarily a centre-back, though he was no stranger to playing at right-back, Barca actually tested Puyol out both as a goalkeeper and as a striker in La Masia, as well as in holding midfield. He came out of that experience as a very well-rounded footballer then, but it was his leadership skills and work ethic that really marked him out as a future superstar. It wasn't until the age of 27 that Puyol actually won his first trophy at Barca, yet he retired at 36 with 18 of them, including 6 La Liga titles and 3 UEFA Champions League crowns. It was following the emergence of the likes of Xavi, Iniesta and Lionel Messi that Puyol really came into his own, providing a Barcelona team which had an abundance of skill, guile and creativity, with the necessary grit and nastiness required to turn them into killers and winners. So Puyol was the captain and the defensive linchpin in the defining team of the post-2000s era to date. He was an outstanding centre-back who had great longevity and played almost all of his football within the relevant period. So, that's enough to make him our runner-up. 0. Honourable mentions. As always, there are far too many great post-2000 centre-backs for me to mention them all, but I just wanted to acknowledge those that came closest to featuring before we come to top spot. Lilian Thuram, Roberto Ayala and Jaap Stam were all world-class centre-backs who made my shortlist but missed out, in large part because they played much of their best football before the turn of the millennium. John Stones, Raphael Varane, Virgil van Dijk, Mats Hummels, Pepe, Diego Godin, and Jerome Boateng were the only current players to make my shortlist, and theoretically, a couple of them could sneak in ahead of Cannavaro if they were to have 2 or 3 more outstanding seasons, though it is quite hard to see it. Elsewhere, Nemanja Vidic, Ricardo Carvalho, Lucio, Sol Campbell, Gerard Piqué, Leonardo Bonucci, and Vincent Kompany all made my second narrowed-down shortlist, but the centre-back who came closest of all to featuring was Giorgio Chiellini. Now playing for LAFC in Major League Soccer at the age of 38, Chiellini is probably the least technically gifted player to even make my shortlist. But there are only a couple who had better pure defensive fundamentals. Born to defend, Chiellini loved the battle with a centre-forward. A front-foot defender who was fearless, aggressive and brave in attacking the ball, with a nose to show for it. I think that he is incredibly unfortunate to miss out on my 7, but that is the nature of this series. Without further ado then, here is your top spot. First, Sergio Ramos. I suspect that this one will divide opinion, not least because it divided my own opinion when I was deliberating the order of my final 7, but ultimately I think that Sergio Ramos has to take top spot. Was he as good of a centre-back as Alessandro Nesta, or even Rio Ferdinand? Absolutely not. Was he, or is he, as composed and positionally sound as Thiago Silva or John Terry? It is highly debatable. But what Ramos has been throughout his 20 years in football is absolutely unrelenting in terms of his mentality, commitment to the sport, and determination to win every game and every competition that he has ever taken part in. The end result is the largest trophy cabinet in this 7, consisting of 7 league titles, 4 Champions Leagues, the World Cup, and 2 Euros. Ramos has also remained at the very highest level throughout the entirety of those 20 years, all of which fall within our remit. Ramos was signed by Real Madrid in 2005, following his breakout campaign at Sevilla as a 19-year-old, becoming the first Spaniard signed by Real Madrid following Florentino Perez's election as president in 2000, and the most expensive Spanish teenager and defender of all time. To say that he justified his massive fee would be a tremendous understatement. A fantastic athlete, a brilliant passer of the ball, and one of the most aerially formidable players of the millennium, Ramos went on to play 671 games for Los Blancos, captaining the club following Iker Casillas' departure. Ramos ranks 4th in Real Madrid's all-time appearance charts, 1st in Spain's, and 6th in the history of international football, and he made 11 FIFPro World 11 appearances, which is more than double any other centre-back, and puts him 3rd only to Messi and Ronaldo. No centre-back, in all of world football, has played more games than Sergio Ramos since 2000, almost 1,000 of them, in case you were wondering, and every one of them has been at the elite level. Factor in his big game credentials, which are the best of anyone in this 7, his leadership skills, and his extraordinary longevity and consistency, given that the criteria is the quality and quantity of a player's post-2000 appearances, and it just feels right that Ramos should take top spot. 7th, Jordi Alba. We start with a man who would be easy to overlook in a 7 of this ilk, but based upon the criteria, he simply has to feature. Alba is 34 years old and began his career as a 17-year-old in the 7th tier of Spanish football in 2006, which means that his career falls perfectly within our parameters. Alba didn't stick around in the 7th tier for long though, joining Valencia in 2007 and breaking into the first team in 2009. In 2012, Alba joined Barcelona for 14 million euros, where he went on to make 459 appearances, winning 17 trophies, in addition to winning 93 caps for Spain, with whom he also won the Euros in 2012. In July, Alba joined Major League Soccer side Inter Miami, along with former Barcelona teammates Sergio Busquets and Lionel Messi, where he has already won the league's cup. Those are the raw facts and figures, but what made Alba so special was his speed, technique, and attacking intent. The standard bearer for attack-minded left-backs in European football for the best part of a decade, along with another player in this seven, Alba had all of the athleticism, close control and vision required to play on the left wing. And in a Barcelona team that routinely dominated teams with 70 to 80% possession, that is effectively where he often played. Alba's movement and finish that effectively killed off Italy with the second goal of the game in the final of Euro 2012 illustrated the movement and striking instincts of a forward. Alba, though not exactly a liability, was never the most proficient defensively, but he had the ability to play almost anywhere on the pitch. Arguably the best crosser of a ball in this entire seven, and believe me, there is some formidable competition coming up, Alba has made an incredible 118 career assists over the course of his career. That is the most of any player in this seven, and it makes him one of only a handful of fullbacks ever to have recorded more than 100 assists, at least since records began. 6th, Roberto Carlos. Speaking of diminutive attack-minded left-backs, Roberto Carlos was an inch shorter than Jordi Alba, at 5'6", and even more averse to defending. Carlos was so attack-minded that Roy Hodgson wanted to play him on the left wing at Inter Milan, but Carlos was insistent that he was a left-back. That disagreement between the two ultimately led Carlos to join Real Madrid for just €6 million. Some Inter Milan fans still haven't forgiven Hodgson for that, almost 30 years on. Carlos was already Brazil's left-back when he joined Real Madrid, but he became a global superstar in the Spanish capital. Renowned for his Hulk-like thighs, thunderous free kicks, and all-round eccentricity, Carlos's defending, again, could be a bit hit and miss. But his left foot was both a wand and a sledgehammer, depending upon the occasion. His speed, stamina, dribbling and crossing ability made him a constant menace down the left flank, and even his long throws were routinely used as an unlikely weapon for both Real Madrid and Brazil during the 2000s. Many of you will have been expecting Carlos to challenge for top spot in this seven, I suspect. Such is his reputation. But the reality is that he began his career in 1991 and was already a full Brazilian international by 1992. Given the fact that Carlos won the last of his 125 Brazil caps in 2006, it means that he actually spent longer in the Brazil team during the 1990s than he did in the 2000s, and he left Real Madrid to join Fenerbahce in 2007. Carlos's ability and performance levels during the 2000s, which saw him win La Liga, the Champions League, and the World Cup, actually finishing as runner-up for the 2002 Ballon d'Or, ahead of Oliver Kahn and Zinedine Zidane, but trailing only his club and international teammate Ronaldo, means that he has to feature. But he is about 10 years too old to ever trouble the podium places in this seven. 5th, Patrice Evra. Was Patrice Evra a better left-back than Roberto Carlos? Probably not, though defensively, he was a bit more solid. But crucially, Evra is 8 years younger than the Brazilian. He began his career, actually in Italy's third tier, in 1998. He joined Nice in Ligue 2 in 2000, and he stepped up to play top-flight football for the first time with Monaco in 2002. Evra enjoyed 3.5 exceptional seasons in Europe's favourite tax haven, reaching a Champions League final and winning the Ligue 1 Young Player of the Year award in the 2003-04 season, before joining Manchester United in January 2006. Alex Ferguson never really liked doing business in the January transfer window, but he made an exception for Evra and Nemanja Vidic in January 2006. And it was very quickly, very easy, to see why he had made that exception. Evra was just the model modern-day fullback. Smart, athletic, and technically proficient, he was solid defensively and adventurous in an attacking sense. It speaks to Evra's completeness as a modern-day left-back that he was also deputised on the left wing during his early years, and very occasionally even as a centre-back at Manchester United, despite the fact that he was only 5'9". All in all, Evra racked up 734 appearances at club level for the likes of Monaco, Manchester United and Juventus, winning some 20 trophies, including 7 league titles and the UEFA Champions League. He won 81 caps for France and, on an individual level, he made the PFA Team of the Season thrice and the FIFPro World 11 in 2009. Given the fact that all of those achievements came post-2000, he has to feature, and I don't really think that it could have been any higher or lower than 5th. 4th, David Alaba. The youngest left-back in this 7, having only turned 31 in June, it speaks volumes about the career David Alaba has had, his consistency, and how young he broke through, that he has already racked up 671 appearances at club and international level. Austria's best footballer of the modern era, Alaba had just turned 17 when he left Austrian Bundesliga side Austria Vienna to join Bundesliga giants Bayern Munich across the border in Germany. Alaba spent the next 13 years in the Bavarian capital, where he established himself as probably the most complete fullback in the world. Alaba's versatility has seen him deputised on the left wing, right wing, in attacking central and defence midfield, and most notably at centre-back, which is where he has played most frequently since signing for Real Madrid. Alaba's reading of the game and offensive nous makes him an excellent centre-back, but it is at left-back that he has played most of his football, and therefore it is the position that he qualifies in for this series. Equally proficient in and out of possession, Alaba has every attribute that you could possibly wish for in a fullback, and he has won the Austrian Footballer of the Year award a whopping 9 times. No one else has won it more than 4 times, and it is in 4th that Alaba features in this 7. Given his consistency at the highest level throughout a career entirely post-2000, Alaba easily could have made my podium places, but I hope you'll forgive me when you see the man up next. 3rd, Paolo Maldini. Almost universally regarded as one of the greatest defenders of all time, Paolo Maldini is, beyond any doubt I would suggest, the best left-back in this 7. In fact, if it was based purely upon the peaks of the players in question's careers, and they merely had to have played in the 2000s, you could make a case for Maldini being the era's best centre-back and left-back. Of course, that isn't the criteria for this series, where quality and quantity of performances is the name of the game, and players can only feature in one position. Maldini played the majority of his football post-2000 at left-back, which is why he features here, and given the fact that he was already 31 at the turn of the millennium, it is pretty remarkable that he features at all, let alone makes the top 3. Of course, Maldini had stupendous longevity, retiring at AC Milan during the same summer, 2009, that he turned 41. In his final season at the San Siro, Maldini still made 32 appearances, and there were few wide players, even those half his age, who managed to get the better of him. Strong, intelligent, and graceful on the ball, Maldini was capable of marking the world's finest forwards out of a game. Ronaldo, the best forward of his generation, described Maldini as the best defender he ever faced, and stated that he should have won multiple FIFA Player of the Year awards. Maldini played 902 games for AC Milan in total, though only 330 of them in the 2000s, and won 126 caps for Italy, though a mere 23 of those are relevant to us, since Maldini retired after the 2002 World Cup. He still won Serie A, the Champions League twice, and finished 3rd in Ballon d'Or voting post-2000 though, which makes him good value for a podium place in my book at least. 2nd, Marcelo. The most technically gifted left-back I have ever seen during my lifetime at least, Marcelo could do things with a ball at his feet that most strikers, wingers, and number 10s could only dream of. Roberto Carlos' successor for both Real Madrid and with Brazil, it took Marcelo a bit of time to step into those boots, as it would with anyone in fairness. Marcelo was even more attack-minded than Carlos, if such a thing is possible, and I would have no qualms about describing him as the worst defender in this 7, despite his spot in 2nd. That is a testament to just how good Marcelo was for a number of years at everything else. He possessed explosive acceleration, a wondrous left foot, and one of the best first touches in world football, let alone for a fullback. Between 2013 and 2018, Marcelo was the best left-back in the world, and he made the FIFPro World 11 6 times between 2012 and 2019. To put their achievements into some context, no other left-back has appeared more than once. In total, Marcelo has made just over 600 appearances at club level, almost 550 of them for Real Madrid, where he won 25 trophies, including 5 UEFA Champions Leagues. He won 58 caps for Brazil, and he is still playing now, age 35, having rejoined his boyhood club Fluminense in February, 16 years after leaving them for Real Madrid. 0. Honourable mentions. I am reluctant to get too bogged down in the honourable mentions because as soon as you mention one player you feel obliged to recognise someone else, and by and large, I found it much easier whittling this shortlist down to 7 than I did with the centre-backs and some others. Nonetheless, Giovanni van Bronckhorst came mightily close to featuring, and likely would have done so had a third of his career not come before the turn of the millennium. Dennis Irwin likewise fell victim to being too old, though much too old in his case, sorry Dennis, and could never be considered given that he left Manchester United in 2002 and retired in 2004. Eric Abidal was an outstanding left-back who perhaps would have snuck in ahead of a couple of players were it not for the tumour on his liver discovered in 2011, which required a transplant in 2012, and both Andy Robertson and Alexandro, two of the most impressive left-backs of the past decade, could possibly overtake Jordi Alba before they hang up their boots, though I couldn't justify it right now. And that brings us to top spot. First, Ashley Cole. I suspect that there will be someone in the comments who suggests that I have put Ashley Cole first solely because he's English. There is always someone who says that on these types of videos, so I will just say that I strongly suspect that Cole will be the only Englishman to top a 7 in this series. Though Cole hardly ever put a foot wrong during his 107 caps for England, which makes him England's most capped fullback of all time, he was never really loved. Club loyalties, accusations of greed, and off-field issues all conspired to make Cole something of a villain at international level, despite the fact that he was the only member of the so-called Golden Generation who consistently replicated his performances at club level on the international stage. At club level, Cole came through the youth ranks at Arsenal, where he made over 200 appearances and was a key cog in Arsene Wenger's invincible team. By 2006, though, Arsenal had slumped to 4th place in the Premier League, and Chelsea had become London's premier club, offering wages to match under the ownership of Roman Abramovich. Cole jumped ship, and he spent the next 8 seasons at Stamford Bridge, racking up over 330 appearances and winning the Champions League, before seeing out his playing days with Roma, LA Galaxy, and very briefly Derby County. Cole played a grand total of 809 matches at club and international level over a 19-year career from 2000 to 2019, and for at least 5 of those years, and arguably as many as 9, I would suggest that he was the best left-back in the world. Defensively the best left-back in this 7 aside from Maldini, while still offering a potent attacking threat with his speed and dynamism down the left flank, particularly during his early years at Arsenal. Cole was a freakishly consistent world-class footballer whose entire career falls within our relevant time frame, and for that reason, he takes top spot. Well, either that or just because he's English. 7th, N'Golo Kante. I very nearly left N'Golo Kante out of this 7, which would have drawn the wrath of several thousand people in the comments no doubt, but I will begin by explaining why that was the case, and why he only takes 7th. Kante was 24 years old when he was spotted by Steve Walsh and signed by Leicester City, following his first ever season of top-flight football with Kahn in Ligue 1. Of course, Kante was superb during his sole season in Leicestershire as the single most important player, in my view at least, in the Foxes' freak Premier League title win. Kante subsequently signed for Chelsea, where he had, I would argue, 2 outstanding seasons, which were his first 2 seasons at the Bridge. You could make the case, therefore, that Kante only actually had 3 truly elite-level seasons in which he played consistent first-team football at the very highest level, which is, by some distance it should be said, the fewest of anyone in this 7, and fewer than a number of the honourable mentions that I'll come to later on. That is not to say, of course, that Kante didn't still have great games or even great runs of form post-2018 and outside of those 3 seasons. He was pivotal, for example, in both semi-finals and the final of Chelsea's 2021 Champions League win, just that from 2018 onwards, he tended to be great in patches and he had a fairly rough time with injuries. The reason why Kante still, just about, features in this 7, ahead of players with far greater longevity, is because his peak was truly phenomenal. Indeed, during those 3 years, between 2015 and 2018, Kante was arguably the single most effective midfielder on the planet, and one of the most decisive footballers in the world in terms of influencing the outcome of a game. Relentless in his running and determination to win the ball back, for a long time it was joked that Kante was like having 2 players in midfield, but it was a joke that wasn't without some merit. He may be washed up now, age 32 in Saudi Arabia, having failed to even hit double figures for appearances in a miserable campaign for Chelsea last season, but Kante's peak would put him in contention for a spot in our top 3, so he just about sneaks in at 7th. 6th, Fernandinho. Fernandinho may never have been as lauded as N'Golo Kante was at his peak, and perhaps he never quite possessed the individual match-winning prowess that Kante did at his absolute zenith, but he was a world-class defensive midfielder for a much longer period of time. Unlike Kante, Fernandinho aged like a fine wine, actually peaking right around the age that Kante is now. A graduate of the Atlético Paranaense youth ranks, Fernandinho broke into the first team and immediately became a star man in the top flight of Brazilian football in 2003, aged only 18. His next stop, like a number of promising Brazilian youngsters when they moved to Europe, was Shakhtar Donetsk, where Fernandinho spent 8 whole years. How the Ukrainians managed to keep hold of him for quite so long is anyone's guess, and when Manchester City finally prized him from their hands in 2013, by which stage Fernandinho was 28 years old, they were forced to fork out what then looked like a fairly hefty £34 million. It proved to be an absolute bargain. Fernandinho was excellent from day one at the Etihad, lifting the Premier League title under Manuel Pellegrini during his debut campaign, but he reached yet new heights following the appointment of Pep Guardiola. Fernandinho's peak, in my view, came in the 2018-19 season when he was arguably the standout player in a Manchester City team which won 98 points. The game that season between Manchester City and Liverpool, who were neck and neck at the top of the table pretty much all season, is probably the single highest quality game of Premier League football that I have ever seen, and Fernandinho was without doubt the man of the match. In total, he spent 8 years in England and 16 years in Europe, and he is still going strong now at the age of 38, back at his boyhood club Atlético Paranaense. Fernandinho's longevity is virtually unrivaled in this 7, having made over 800 club appearances, and he has played far more games since 2000 than any other player in this 7. All things considered, he had to feature, and it speaks to the calibre of the players up next that he only takes 6th. 5th, Claude Makelele. Whilst it is difficult to say for certain whether some players are actually defensive midfielders, that certainly isn't the case with either Fernandinho or especially Claude Makelele. One thing that I feel compelled to clarify just to begin with, because I see it repeated so often here in England, Claude Makelele did not invent the role of a holding midfielder who sits in front of a back 4. It became known, exclusively in England it should be said, as the Makelele role, because 4-4-2 was so ubiquitous in the Premier League when he arrived, and Makelele's effectiveness there under Jose Mourinho was iconic. So that is not to downplay Makelele's talents or accomplishments, it is just to say that defensive midfielders existed over 100 years ago, and it is a bit of a bizarre misconception that seems to have taken hold in some quarters. Makelele was born in Kinshasa, in what was then Zaire, but grew up in France from the age of 4 and began his professional career with Nantes, where he became a full French international. Moves to Marseille and Celta Vigo followed, before Makelele became the least glamorous, but perhaps the most important, of Real Madrid's Galacticos. Zinedine Zidane is famously quoted as having asked, quote, "Why put another layer of gold paint on the Bentley when you are losing the entire engine?" when Madrid sold Makelele to Chelsea in 2003, and it proved to be a reasonable assessment. Makelele was outstanding in the English capital, as important as any of Chelsea's back four, as they conceded only 15 league goals during the 2004-05 season, before spending his last few years at Paris Saint-Germain. The first 9 years of Makelele's career, pre-2000, are entirely irrelevant to this 7, which prevents him from ever troubling our top 3, but he was one of the game's greatest destroyers and defensive shields who played his best football in the 2000s, and therefore, he deservedly features in 5th. 4th, Xabi Alonso. I will refrain from calling Xabi Alonso the best midfielder to play for Liverpool during the 2000s, through fear of having my windows bricked and my house pelted with dog turds by Liverpool fans, but you could certainly make a case for it. Phenomenal at almost everything that he did, Alonso could sit deep given his ability to read the game and willingness to put in a tackle, but he was gifted, inventive, and incisive when in possession of the ball and playing slightly further forward. He also had the occasional worldie in him, which, is always fun. A Basque native who made 5 appearances for the unofficial Basque Country national team, alongside his 114 caps for Spain, Alonso began his career with Real Sociedad before joining Liverpool in 2004. Following 5 seasons at Anfield, the first of which resulted in one of the most extraordinary Champions League wins of all time, Alonso made a £30 million move to Real Madrid. At the Bernabeu, Alonso scaled yet new heights, and in his final season with the club, he won a 2nd Champions League. 3 seasons at Bayern Munich followed before Alonso bowed out in 2017 as still an elite-level player at the age of 35. The fact that Alonso won 114 caps for Spain in holding midfield during an era of almost unrivaled competition in his position speaks volumes about his talent and the regard that he was held in by almost everyone in the game. Combine that with the fact that his entire career came post-2000 and was spent playing almost exclusively elite-level football, and his inclusion in this 7 was never in any doubt. It was just a matter of placement. 3rd, Patrick Vieira. Probably the best player in this 7, in my eyes at least. There are 2 points to address right off the bat in regards to Patrick Vieira. Firstly, he is one of those players whose status as a defensive midfielder is up for debate, having been a box-to-box player who was as important on the ball as he was off it, and secondly, his age, and when he played his football as a result. In regards to the first, it was a pretty close call for me, but as we are only interested in his post-2000 performances, and he did drop deeper as the years went on, I think that it is about right. As for the second, well, Vieira began his career in 1993, which means he has a whole 7 years of irrelevant performances in the context of this 7. Naturally, that counts against him, and were that not the case, he may well have featured even higher. But the quality and quantity of Vieira's performances post-2000 still merit a spot in 3rd. One of several outstanding French footballers to make their name with Kahn, Vieira didn't spend long in the Côte d'Azur before he was snapped up by AC Milan. In a star-studded Milan team, Vieira struggled for first-team opportunities, and after playing just 2 league games for the club, the Italian giants foolishly sold him to Arsenal. Vieira went on to become one of the Premier League's greatest ever signings, captains, and indeed players in North London. A born leader, whose long legs were equally effective in dispossessing opponents from seemingly impossible angles on the slide, and in driving Arsenal up the pitch and providing a springboard for their attacks, Vieira is perhaps the Premier League's greatest ever midfield all-rounder. Vieira also won over 100 caps for France, and after leaving Arsenal, he won a trio of Scudettos and a first Champions League with Inter Milan, in addition to enjoying brief stints with Juventus and Manchester City. Age prevents Vieira from ever mounting a serious challenge for top spot, but a podium place given the circumstances is a reflection of his ability, consistency, and performances throughout the 11 years of the 2000s that he played in. Second, Casemiro. I must admit, I went back and forth on this one a couple of times, and I suspect that there will be some backlash, but all things considered, I think Casemiro deserves to be considered the second best defensive midfielder of the 21st century. That might seem like a bold claim for someone who is still starring for a European giant now, and is only 31 years old, but I think that Casemiro can back it up. For a start, Casemiro has already played 564 games at club level and has won 73 caps for Brazil, so whilst hopefully there will be many more to come, he already has many more appearances within the relevant time period than Kante, Makelele or Vieira. Though he broke into the Sao Paulo team at the age of only 18, Casemiro has played the vast majority of his football for Real Madrid, where he was as important as Toni Kroos and Luka Modric for almost a decade in what was for a long time the best midfield trio on the planet. Casemiro racked up more than 300 appearances in Madrid, where he won the UEFA Champions League 5 times, in addition to 13 other trophies. In the summer of 2022, Casemiro joined Manchester United, commanding a potential £70 million transfer fee, even at the age of 30. And I think that since making that move, a lot of English football fans have come to appreciate that Casemiro is much more than the mere destroyer that he was sometimes portrayed as being in Madrid. Obviously incredibly strong, athletic and powerful in the tackle, Casemiro also has first-class defensive instincts, combined with the ability to pick a pass and even pop up with an all-important goal. Casemiro's performance levels over the past decade have been freakish, consistently ranking as one of the best defensive midfielders on the planet, and for that reason, he takes second. 0. Honourable mentions. I must admit, this was probably the toughest 7 yet, and you don't realise until you actually spend, about 5 hours looking into it and drawing up a shortlist just how many incredible defensive midfielders there have been over the last 23 years. Sami Khedira, for example, never even came close to featuring, but was a phenomenal footballer. The same goes for Michael Carrick, Marcus Senna, Owen Hargreaves, Nigel de Jong, Gareth Barry, Arturo Vidal, and John Obi Mikel. The likes of Rodri and Joshua Kimmich, it should be said, missed out by virtue of just not quite having played enough football yet, though I would imagine that Rodri in particular would dislodge Kante in my eyes at least, before too long. At the opposite end of the spectrum, Roy Keane and Edgar Davids are simply too old to feature, Keane having retired from football entirely in 2006, and Davids having left Inter Milan in 2005, though both were still outstanding in the early 2000s, and therefore deserving of acknowledgement. Elsewhere, Gilberto Silva, Gennaro Gattuso, Javier Mascherano, Daniele De Rossi, Esteban Cambiasso, Michael Essien, and Fabinho would all make some people's sevens, I'm sure, and all came close to featuring in mine. And a special mention, last but not least, must go to Theodoros Zagorakis, who perhaps gave the greatest defensive midfield performance at a major tournament of any player during the last 23 years in Greece's heroic Euro 2004 conquest. Those are the honourable mentions, but there is still time, of course, for the by now somewhat probably quite predictable top spot. First, Sergio Busquets. The perfect pivot in the perfect team this millennium. Ultimately, there is no way in which Sergio Busquets couldn't take top spot. Overshadowed for so long by Xavi and Iniesta, it seemed to take an awfully long time for Sergio Busquets to be properly appreciated. Neither a destroyer like Makelele or even Casemiro, nor a deep-line playmaker spraying out long balls like Pirlo or Alonso, Busquets was quieter in his dispossessing of opponents, typically with interceptions or by cleanly taking the ball off them, both made possible by his supreme defensive positioning and understanding of the game, and in possession, Busquets was just freakishly efficient. The great players do in one touch what a good player does in two, or an average player in three. and Busquets is among the most economical footballers in possession that the game has ever seen. Not always immediately noticeable, the impact that it had upon a fantastic Barcelona team in terms of how it allowed them to control the tempo of games and then switch up that tempo whenever they wanted was absolutely enormous. Cruyff described Busquets as being, quote, like a veteran with or without the ball when he first broke into the Barcelona team as a 20-year-old under Pep Guardiola. Busquets went on to make over 700 appearances at the Camp Nou, where he won an incredible 32 trophies in 15 seasons. At international level, Busquets won 143 caps, which is more than either Xavi or Iniesta, winning the World Cup in 2010 and the Euros in 2012. Age 35, Busquets recently joined Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba at Inter Miami. He is one of the greatest pivots of all time who has played exclusively this millennium, and therefore, he quite comfortably takes top spot. 7th, Paul Scholes. This was the one video in this series that I was dreading more than any of the others, as was the case when I made a series on the greatest Premier League players in every position, and that is precisely because of the age-old Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes debate, which I find tedious beyond belief, and have made my life's mission to avoid engaging in other than when I make one of these videos, and that becomes impossible. Admittedly, if it really was my life's mission, I probably would have just picked a different job, but that's besides the point. These are 3 players, even the most recent of which retired over 7 years ago, that people are still arguing incessantly about how to order them or who was the best is just a spectacular waste of everyone's time, so to keep absolutely no one happy, I've ordered them completely differently to how I did in my video on the greatest ever Premier League midfielders, and I will explain why that is the case with the next inclusion, but for now, we'll just stick to why Paul Scholes is in 7th. The most talented of the trio, in my humble opinion, and neither Gerrard nor Lampard themselves would disagree with that assessment. Anyone who trained with, or played against Scholes was mesmerised by his ability with a ball at his feet. Never the most athletic, or the most tactful out of possession, it should be said. When he had the ball, Scholes could pretty much do as he pleased. Early in his career, playing as a number 10 or even as a second striker at times behind Ruud van Nistelrooy, that meant playing lots of through balls and scoring plenty of goals. It is often forgotten that Scholes scored 20 goals in the 2002-03 season, and excluding penalties, of which he only ever took 3 and scored 3, Scholes had a better goals-to-game ratio than Gerrard. Later in his career, Scholes became Manchester United's midfield metronome, arguably becoming even more pivotal to Alex Ferguson as a deep-line playmaker, controlling games, dictating the tempo, and pulling the strings. How many cliches was that? Scholes was brilliant in both roles and had a wonderfully decorated career, winning 25 trophies, including 11 Premier League titles and 2 Champions Leagues. 9 of those 25 trophies came pre-2000 though, as did 5.5 years of Scholes' career, which just about holds him back from the upper echelons of this 7. But he still takes 7th, ahead of some brutal competition. 6th, Frank Lampard. Well, I alluded to it at the end there, but while Scholes featured ahead of Lampard in my Premier League's greatest series, and I do believe Scholes was a more gifted footballer than Lampard, in fact, I genuinely think that is pretty much inarguable, Lampard is younger than Scholes, and he played more games than either Scholes or Gerrard, quite a lot more in fact. Lampard racked up some 1,021 senior career appearances, compared to Gerrard's 863 and Scholes' 784. Lampard is also the single most productive central midfielder of the 21st century in terms of goals and assists, and by some distance too, having made a grand total of 467 goal contributions, and, as we all know, it should have been 468. There are world-class forwards who never manage to put up those kinds of numbers, but it would be crass to talk solely in terms of numbers and mathematics when dealing with a player of the calibre of Frank Lampard. It is sometimes said, particularly in the context of these Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes debates, that Lampard was a brilliant professional, got in the right place at the right time, and scored loads of goals. All of those things are undoubtedly true, of course, but it is just such a gross oversimplification. I have been to quite a lot of football matches, I'd hazard a guess and not far off 1,000, and one of the best all-round performances that I've ever witnessed live came courtesy of Frank Lampard. His touch, vision, awareness, weight of pass, and, yes, of course, his eye for goal were all absolutely phenomenal. There were 5 seasons in which Lampard scored 20 or more goals and another in which he bagged 19. And in 2005, the year that Steven Gerrard inspired Liverpool to the Champions League, Lampard came second in Ballon d'Or voting, 1 place ahead of Gerrard, and only very narrowly trailing Ronaldinho. He was a phenomenal footballer who played the vast majority of his football post-2000, so for now we can overlook the fact that he said he had a lot of respect for David Cameron and George Osborne in 2014, after they'd already implemented a brutal programme of austerity that resulted in more than 300,000 estimated excess deaths, and stick him in 6th. 5th, Steven Gerrard. After saying that I hate the Gerrard-Lampard-Scholes debate, yes, I am aware that I've ordered them side by side as the first 3 inclusions in this 7, but based upon the criteria, that is just how they fell. Steven Gerrard, who I also ranked below Paul Scholes in my Premier League series, I think deserves to come out on top out of the 3 of them in the context of the 21st century. Gerrard is the youngest of the 3, 2 years younger than Lampard and 5 years younger than Scholes, which means that, unlike the other 2, pretty much his entire career came post-2000. Gerrard made 13 appearances in the 1998-99 season, but it was in the 1999-2000 season that he really announced himself to the world, breaking into the England team by the end of 2000. Arguably, and by that I mean that this is an argument that I would make, Gerrard is the most complete midfielder in this 7. A brilliant athlete, he could run, jump, shoot, tackle, head the ball, switch the play an intricate 1-2, cross the ball, burst past someone, and, of course, he was an inspirational leader and captain for the best part of 2 decades. He probably would have been half decent in goal had he have been asked to play there. Gerrard probably never would have been as lethal as Lampard, even in the same team and system, or quite as gifted in terms of dictating a game as Scholes, but he could have, and indeed on occasion did, perform both roles expertly, as well as making a pretty turgid Liverpool team at times highly competitive, being a talisman pretty much his entire career, and inspiring his boyhood club to the highest of highs, even during one of their lowest eras. Gerrard was as good at playing football as he is bad at managing, which is saying something because he is an utterly atrocious manager. So that's why he takes 5th. 4th, Luka Modric. Finally, at long last, just as the prophecy foretold, we escaped the tedious abyss of Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes discourse with a player who, I believe, post-2000 at least, is greater than all 3. Luka Modric is 38 years old, yet he is still one of the best midfielders on the planet, and he played a whopping 52 games for Real Madrid last season. Either he is a medical marvel who really needs to be studied by scientists, or he is juiced up to the eyeballs on performance-enhancing drugs, and there is about to be a massive scandal a few years after he hangs up his boots. Just for now, we'll assume that he isn't football's answer to Lance Armstrong, and give him his dues. His dues, I said. Not his special juice, it is the club doctors who would administer that, were it the case, which, of course, I reiterate, I have absolutely no evidence or reason to believe that it is. A weedy and diminutive midfielder who honed his skills in the car park of a hotel housing refugees after his family fled the Yugoslav wars, Modric looks like a man who would be physically dominated in midfield, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Having made his name as a number 10 at Dinamo Zagreb and Tottenham Hotspur, Real Madrid signed Modric after a protracted transfer saga in the summer of 2012. And after his debut campaign at the Santiago Bernabeu, Spanish newspaper Marca picked him out as La Liga's worst signing of the season. That turned out to be one of the worst assessments in the entire history of football. In Madrid, Modric found a new home. I mean, literally I assume, but also on the pitch, playing as an 8 rather than as a 10 in a deeper role, where his energy and industry, combined with his vision and awareness, made him simply one of the most faultless and flawless footballers on the planet for the previous decade. Modric recently surpassed 1,000 senior appearances for both club and country, over 100 more than either Gerrard or Scholes ever managed, and soon to exceed Lampard, all post-2000, and he is still playing and excelling at the very highest level, even now. It's hard to see what more he could have done or accomplished, to be honest, or why he's only 4th, but I suppose it just comes down to the sheer genius of the 3 players up next. 3rd, Andrea Pirlo. I've recently seen Andrea Pirlo being described a couple of times as overrated, which I suppose could be true, assuming that people rate him as the greatest player of all time, much better than either Messi or Pelé, or something along those lines. Outside of that, I would suggest that it is quite difficult for Pirlo to be overrated. At his job, as a regista, as the Italians call it, operating from a central role in front of the defence, always looking to get on the ball and create from deep, there has been no one better in my lifetime. Pirlo made his name with his boyhood club Brescia, and he went on to star for Italy's 3 biggest clubs, Juventus, AC Milan, and Inter Milan. Inter's decision to sell Pirlo to their fiercest rivals for 33 billion lira, which is about 17 million euros, in 2001 must be among the worst decisions that the club has ever made. Though AC Milan's decision to only offer Pirlo a 1-year extension on his contract a decade later, because he was over the age of 30, was almost as daft. Pirlo turned down the 1-year deal and joined Juventus, where he proceeded to win 4 Scudettos in 4 seasons as the club's main man, racking up 164 appearances. Pirlo was a genius both in and out of possession, blessed in the subtle art of being able to dummy players and wriggle free of them without so much as thinking about it, and then in the less subtle art of playing some of the most sublime passes that you have ever seen. Pirlo played significantly fewer games than Modric, won fewer trophies, though he still won 2 Champions Leagues and a World Cup, and he played 3.5 seasons of football pre-2000. But still, his influence on the sport has been greater than probably any other player in this 7. He was as gifted as they come, and I couldn't forgive myself if he didn't make the podium, even based upon the stated criteria. 2nd, Andres Iniesta. One of the most entertaining players of my lifetime at least, pretentious or as presumptuous as this may sound, and it sounds very, if you don't enjoy watching Andres Iniesta, whatever the context, I'm not sure that football is the sport for you. A graduate of the La Masia youth ranks, Iniesta made his Barcelona debut at the age of 18, back when he still had hair, but it took him a little bit of time to get going in the senior game. He didn't even make his international debut, for instance, until the age of 22, and even then, only after he was a surprise call-up to Spain's 2006 World Cup squad. The fact that Iniesta scored the winning goal in the final of the following World Cup, and went on to win 131 caps despite his late start, probably tells you how the rest of his career went. At club level, Iniesta soon became the star of arguably the greatest midfield trio of all time under Pep Guardiola, going on to play almost 700 games for Barcelona, where he won 31 trophies, including 9 La Liga titles and 4 UEFA Champions Leagues. Iniesta played and continues to play predominantly in central midfield, hence his inclusion in this 7, but far from exclusively, also featuring in attacking midfield and fairly frequently wide on the left. Iniesta actually started his career in defensive midfield, but his skill and composure were correctly identified as being best put to use higher up the pitch, where he was near enough impossible to dispossess, and made threading the ball through the eye of a needle, after spotting a pass that no one even up in the stands could see, look as though it were second nature. Iniesta is still playing now, would you believe it, aged 39, having recently joined a club that you've never heard of called Emirates in the UAE, following 5 whole years and 134 appearances for Vissel Kobe in Japan. Iniesta's later years have very little bearing on where he ranks in this 7. He did his heavy lifting at Barca, but it is impressive longevity all the same. 0. Honourable mentions. I won't bore you by naming every player who made the shortlist for this 7, and I'll instead restrict myself only to those who nearly featured, or who likely require some justification as to why they didn't. Zinedine Zidane, for instance, is arguably the greatest central midfielder to have played during the 2000s, but is nowhere to be found. That's because Zizou retired from football entirely in 2006, and as good as he was between 2000 and 2006, no one has yet featured in this series off the back of just 6 years of football, and given the criteria, no one is likely to in the future, and I think that it would be not only a little disrespectful, but downright dishonest, to suggest that Zidane did more in his roughly 300 appearances post-2000 than the likes of Gerrard, Lampard or Scholes did in more than twice that number of games, even if he was more gifted and enjoyed a far greater peak than any of those 3. The 5 midfielders who came closest to featuring were Clarence Seedorf, Cesc Fabregas, Toni Kroos, Yaya Toure and Michael Ballack, all of whom, in my view, could go toe-to-toe with the 3 Englishmen who first featured. Ballack, in particular, had he not played a good few years of football before 2000, or retired earlier than some of the others at 35, having already regressed a little during his time at Chelsea and his second stint at Bayer Leverkusen, would undoubtedly have featured. Once again, his peak, between 2000 and 2005, was as good as, if not even better than, pretty much anything that anyone in this 7 produced, not just Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes. Similarly, Yaya Toure at his best was an absolute freak who could do it all, and looked to be playing a different sport at times, and were we considering peaks alone he would undoubtedly have featured. Seedorf was a marvel with practically no technical, physical or mental faults, aside from the occasional bout of inconsistency. Kroos is like Paul Scholes' heir apparent on a football pitch, and Fabregas would have been a shoo-in had he not tailed off around the age of 31. Even then, it is worth bearing in mind that he is one of the greatest teenage footballers of all time, and had made a tremendous number of appearances and become a star man at Arsenal before most players have even been promoted to the reserves. Elsewhere, shoutouts go to the likes of Ivan Rakitic, Torsten Frings, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Marco Verratti, and Juan Sebastian Veron. But for a variety of different reasons, it was always going to be an uphill battle for any of them to sneak in. Before I leave you, wonderful people though, there is of course still time for the small matter of top spot. First, Xavi. I don't want to say that it was an easy decision to put Xavi in first place, because you are talking about competition in the form of Luka Modric, Andrea Pirlo, and his old comrade at Barcelona, Andres Iniesta. No one is good enough to comfortably see off competition of that calibre, but all I will say is that Xavi was my favourite to take top spot before I drafted this 7, and the more I researched, rewatched and thought about it, the more confident that I became that that was the right decision. Like Iniesta, Xavi was a graduate of La Masia who made his Barcelona debut at 18, but unlike Iniesta, he looked immediately at home. Long touted for stardom, an injury to Pep Guardiola saw Xavi propelled into regular first-team action, and in his debut campaign, he made 26 appearances and won the La Liga Breakout Player of the Year award. Guardiola never won back his place at Barca, and actually never really recovered from that setback, but he didn't hold grudges, and when he took over at Barca in 2008, as good as Xavi already was, he reached yet new heights. Basically an even better version of Guardiola, Xavi was Pep's dream player, and the most important player in his all-conquering Barcelona team over the next 4 years, after Lionel Messi. Xavi was better than any other player that I've ever seen at constantly making himself available to the man in possession. His ability to drift into space, provide players with an option, and to know, before anyone else, exactly what he was going to do if or when he received the ball was pivotal to everything that made Barcelona the best team in the world and, in some people's eyes, the best of all time. In total, Xavi made 945 appearances at club level, 767 of them in the Barcelona first team, as well as winning 133 caps for Spain. He won La Liga 8 times, the Champions League 4 times, the Euros twice, and the World Cup once. Xavi was denied a Ballon d'Or by Messi and Ronaldo, but in 2020, France Football named him in their Ballon d'Or 11, their dream team consisting of the greatest players of all time, where he featured alongside Lev Yashin, Cafu, Franz Beckenbauer, Paolo Maldini, Lothar Matthäus, Diego Maradona, Pelé, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima. It is a horribly unbalanced team, if we are being honest, but I agree with their assessment of Xavi, who, rightly in my view, tops this 7. 7th, Juan Román Riquelme. I said these are indisputably the 7 greatest attacking midfielders since 2000 in jest there, what am I like? Because this is such a debatable list that perhaps no 2 people in the world could ever agree upon the exact same 7, and that is illustrated by the man in 7th. To some, Juan Román Riquelme should be in the top 3 of this 7, based upon his sheer ability and status as perhaps the greatest old-school number 10 since 2000. Meanwhile, to others, Riquelme's repeated fallouts and lack of success and trophies, both in Europe and on the international stage, ought to prevent him from even coming close to featuring. Amidst those 2 extremes, regrettably I suppose, I am a Juan Román Riquelme centrist. I think Riquelme probably is among the 3 most talented players in this 7, and among the most gifted in any position over the last 30 years, and although Riquelme only spent 4.5 years playing in Europe, which, inevitably, lowers his stock in the eyes of many Europeans, it's all too often forgotten just how good he was for 3 of those years. Riquelme is the quintessential example of a classical 10 that we don't really see in the modern game, and even in the early to mid-2000s, he seemed like a player from a bygone era. I often compare Riquelme to Diego Maradona, but without the speed and explosivity, and I don't think that that is being hyperbolic. Riquelme's vision, awareness, touch, technique, dribbling, and weight of pass were all inspired, and he is perhaps the only player who ever dog-walked Claude Makélélé around a football pitch and made him look like a Sunday League clogger. Riquelme transformed Villarreal from bottom-half stragglers into Champions League semi-finalists, and between 2003 and 2005, he was arguably the best midfielder in Europe. That is despite the fact that Riquelme probably played his best football with Boca Juniors either side of his brief stint in Spain, and it is only his short-lived stay in Europe and lack of success or longevity in Europe and on the international stage that prevents Riquelme from featuring higher, but I couldn't bring myself to leave him out entirely. 6th, David Silva. In direct contrast to Riquelme, David Silva perhaps lacked some of the star power of some of the other players in this 7, and he was arguably never his club or country's main man, but his consistency, longevity, and level of success are virtually without peer. Unlike Riquelme, who is 8 years his senior, Silva also has the added advantage of every one of his more than 900 senior career appearances having come post-2000. A graduate of the Valencia Academy who spent just 4 years in Los Che's first team before being snapped up by Manchester City, Silva went on to spend a decade at the Etihad. When he arrived in 2010, Man City hadn't won a trophy in 34 years, and they hadn't been crowned as champions of England in 42. When he departed in 2020, they had won 13 trophies, including 4 Premier League titles, becoming the dominant force in the English game. That wasn't solely down to Silva, of course. A certain Gulf state had a fair bit to do with it, but you could make a compelling case for Silva being Manchester City's greatest player of all time, and he is certainly among their top 5. At international level, Silva won the Euros twice and the 2010 World Cup with Spain, racking up 125 caps in total in one of the most competitive midfields ever assembled, and his 35 goals puts him 4th in Spain's all-time scoring charts. Silva was a technical marvel, a tireless runner, and exceptionally intelligent. He could perform any midfield or attacking role with aplomb, and as a number 10, where he played most of his football, he is just about the most complete that the Premier League has ever seen. 5th, Mesut Ozil. If Mesut Ozil hadn't peaked at about the age of 23, there is every chance that he would have topped this 7, or certainly have made the podium places. Ruud Gullit described Ozil as being technically perfect, while Jose Mourinho once said, quote, "Ozil is unique. There is no copy of him, not even a bad copy." End quote. Ozil, like Riquelme, felt like a bit of a throwback, and it speaks to his phenomenal ability at his peak that, despite never really being a Jose Mourinho player, just look at how he dealt with Juan Mata, Ozil barely missed a game during his 3 years at Real Madrid. Ozil racked up 157 appearances across those 3 seasons, during which time he made 81 assists and scored 27 goals. The season before he joined Real Madrid, Ozil made 29 assists and scored 10 goals for Schalke. His nickname, the Assist King, was richly deserved then, and he was probably the best advanced playmaker, at his peak, that we have seen this century. Even at Arsenal, where Ozil was not without his critics, he still topped the Premier League's assist charts in the 2015-16 season, having made 19 assists in only 35 games. Unfortunately, things soured for Ozil at Arsenal in his last couple of years, and he failed to revive his career in Turkey with either Fenerbahce or Istanbul Başakşehir. Ozil basically departed centre stage in terms of being a star performer at the highest level at the age of only 29, but it's often forgotten that he broke through and enjoyed enormous success quite early on. Ozil, therefore, still managed to make 605 appearances before hanging up his boots 8 months ago, all of them post-2000 of course, so all things considered, I think 5th seems appropriate. 4th, Thomas Muller. There are 2 points to address first and foremost in regard to Thomas Muller, namely that he isn't an attacking midfielder, and he is much worse at football than everyone else in this 7, yet I've ranked him as the 4th best attacking midfielder of the 21st century. On the first point, Muller has played everywhere in a forward line over the years, and has even pioneered his own position, Raumdeuter, literally, space interpreter in English. I'm not making a video on the 7 best Raumdeuters though, but if I were, you can be assured that he would be top, so attacking midfield is the next best thing. On the second point, I suppose it depends upon what exactly we mean when we say good or bad at football. Sure, Muller is the least technically gifted player in this 7, and probably by some distance, but there is more to football than beating a man or dribbling the entire length of the pitch. Muller is among the most intelligent footballers of the modern era, he is a tremendous professional, and his composure in the final third is inspired. In terms of pure numbers, no one in this 7 can live with him. Muller has already made 680 appearances for Bayern Munich, the second most in the history of the club, during which time he has scored 279 goals and made 266 assists, putting him 3rd in the club's all-time scoring charts and 1st in terms of assists. He has also won 125 caps and scored 45 goals for Germany, with whom he won the 2014 World Cup alongside Mesut Ozil, putting him 4th in Germany's all-time appearance charts and 6th in terms of goals. What's more, Muller is still going strong for both club and country at the age of 34, and he should get plenty of assists this season, with Harry Kane playing in front of him. It is a quite remarkable record all round, so whilst I couldn't justify putting Muller ahead of either of the 3 players up next, his spot in this 7 was never in doubt. 3rd, Kevin De Bruyne. The youngest player in this 7, Kevin De Bruyne is only 32 years old, and it's not unimaginable to me that if he can stay fit for another 3 or 4 years, he could go 2nd or even 1st in this list. the most talented midfielder I think that the Premier League has ever seen, De Bruyne is the complete package. He can run, he can score all kinds of different goals, and, above all else of course, his vision, range of passing, and particularly his weight of pass are absolutely breathtaking. Arguably, Lionel Messi is the only better passer of all in world football over the past decade, and in terms of deliveries from wide areas, De Bruyne is probably even better than him. Having made his name at Genk, De Bruyne struggled for game time in his first foray into elite-level football with Chelsea, but it didn't take him long to bounce back from that setback. In his only full season at Wolfsburg, De Bruyne scored 16 goals and made 28 assists in 51 games to claim the Bundesliga Player of the Year award. That marked De Bruyne's arrival as a world-class footballer, aged 23, and he has been at that level or higher throughout the 9 years since. De Bruyne has won the Manchester City Player of the Year award 4 times during 8 seasons at the club, which is fairly astonishing when one thinks of the level of competition and the injuries that De Bruyne has had during that time. The fact that he has only made 686 senior appearances to date perhaps prevents him from cracking the top 2, combined with the fact that both of the players up next, hard as it may be to believe, were even more freakishly talented than him. Second, Kaká. It makes me feel incredibly old to say this, but I am well aware that there will be people watching this video who aren't old enough to have seen Kaká at his best. Thankfully, there is plenty of footage for those people, and I can think of few better ways to waste an afternoon on YouTube, other than watching my videos of course. Kaká was blessed with every attribute that a number 10 could ever want. He was brilliant on the ball, a box of tricks. He could glide past players with consummate ease, and he was lethal in the final third. Kaká, as was sometimes overlooked even when he was at his best, was also sensationally quick, making it nearly impossible to catch back up with him once he'd got past you, and making him one of the most potent players on the planet in transition and on the break. Kaká was the only member of AC Milan's 2007 Champions League winning team who was under the age of 28, and it was his speed, invention, and youthful zeal that turned a wily old bunch of superstars into an unstoppable cup team. Kaká deservedly won both the FIFA World Player of the Year award and the Ballon d'Or in 2007, but he was world-class throughout the entirety of his first 6 years at the San Siro, and indeed, for 3 years with Sao Paulo before that. Kaká struggled with injuries following his 2009 world record-breaking transfer to Real Madrid, and he was never quite the lightning-quick and routinely devastating force that he had been in Serie A, though he certainly still had his moments. That lack of longevity, Kaká was 32 when he left Europe, 33 when he began playing in Major League Soccer, and only actually has 60 more appearances to his name than De Bruyne, denies him of top spot, but not of his rightful place as one of the greatest attacking midfielders, and indeed, one of the greatest footballers of the modern era. 0. Honourable mentions. It was a brutal task trying to assemble this 7, and the list of candidates was longer than it has been for any other video in this series up to this point. The players who came closest to featuring were probably Deco, Wesley Sneijder, and Marco Reus, but honourable mentions go to the likes of Diego, Paulo Dybala, Yuri Djurkaev, Christian Eriksen, JJ Okocha, Rui Costa, Marek Hamšík, James Rodriguez, Johan Gurkuf, Juan Mata, Dimitri Payet, Philipp Coutinho, Isco, Bruno Fernandes, Rafael van der Vaart, Guti, and a special shout-out also to Mohamed Aboutrika, who never got the chance to see an elite-level league, but who was certainly a special player. Those are just some of the most notable honourable mentions, but now it is time for your top spot. First, Ronaldinho. I must admit, when I started planning this 7, much as I thought Ronaldinho had the best peak of any attacking midfielder post-2000, I didn't actually expect him to take top spot purely by virtue of the fact that, as we all know, he suffered rather a steep early drop-off. When you dig deep down into it though, it's hard to argue against Ronaldinho. His first 2 seasons with Gremio do fall outside of our purview in 1998 and 1999, but in 2000, he scored 28 goals in 37 games for his boyhood club, and in 2001, he was snapped up by PSG. Ronaldinho starred alongside fellow free spirit JJ Kocher in the French capital, and a year after winning the 2002 World Cup, Barcelona managed to steal in ahead of Manchester United and Alex Ferguson to sign him. Ironically, Barca only signed Ronaldinho because they had missed out on signing David Beckham from Manchester United, who chose to sign for Real Madrid instead. Meanwhile, Manchester United themselves signed Cristiano Ronaldo that summer after missing out on Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho hit his peak in Catalonia, and between 2003 and 2007, he was the best player in the world. Utterly unplayable at times, Ronaldinho had a penchant for pulling off tricks in Champions League knockout ties that most players wouldn't even dare to attempt in training. His trademark smile, quick feet, and childish spirit made him an iconic figure. And in the 2005-06 season, for example, Ronaldinho scored 26 goals and made 24 assists in 45 appearances. That is a return of better than a goal contribution per game, on top of all the flicks, tricks, and routine humiliations. Ronaldinho spent that season playing on the left wing, and in truth, he could very easily have been considered for that 7 instead, which might have been a little bit more challenging to top. Even after leaving Barcelona, which some consider to be the end of Ronaldinho's career at the highest level, it has to be noted that he made 19 assists and scored 15 goals in 43 games for AC Milan in the 2009-10 season, before enjoying 2 inspired seasons with both Flamengo and Atletico Mineiro back in Brazil, winning the Brazilian Footballer of the Year award. All in all, Ronaldinho's longevity isn't nearly as bad as some people make out. It's just that his peak was so incredible. His ability was off the charts, and his peak, as I say, was the highest of anyone in this 7. With no freakishly consistent rivals who have enjoyed far greater consistency or longevity than him with similar levels of ability, that is enough for the Champions League, World Cup, and Ballon d'Or winner to take top spot. 7th, Luis Figo. The oldest player in this 7, Luis Figo has among the shortest post-2000 careers of anyone to have featured in this series so far, and that is a testament to the level of his performances during that time. Figo's career was split, almost to the match in fact, 50-50 between the 1990s and the 2000s, and he was at his absolute best right at the turn of the millennium. Clearly destined to be a superstar right from his early days with Sporting, Figo was inspired at Barcelona, and he deservedly won the Ballon d'Or in 2000, ahead of the likes of Thierry Henry, Andrei Shevchenko, and soon-to-be Real Madrid teammate Zinedine Zidane. It was a tight call in 7th, to be perfectly honest, between Figo and another of his future Real Madrid teammates, David Beckham. I honestly think that it has got to the point where Beckham is severely underrated now, and he didn't retire until 2013, 4 years after Figo. Whereas Beckham joined LA Galaxy in 2007 though, Figo played, and indeed starred at the highest level, right until the very end. Also, as good and as underrated as Beckham is, Figo was still better than him in probably every aspect of his game aside from crossing, set pieces and stamina, all of which are areas where Figo still excelled. Beckham was just in a class of his own. A brilliant dribbler with a first-class football brain, which really came to the fore in his last 4 years playing for Inter Milan, where Figo played predominantly in a more central role. A younger audience might be tempted to look at Figo's goal-scoring record and question his inclusion in this 7. In total, Figo scored 169 goals at club and international level, which is fewer than the likes of Pedro or Raheem Sterling. In an era of 4-4-2s though, where wingers were often referred to as wide midfielders, that was actually an outstanding record. And more importantly still, scoring goals wasn't Figo's primary role. He was there to link up the play, beat players and create, and at that, there have been few better in any era. The only players with more La Liga assists than Figo are Messi and Xavi, both of whom spent far longer and played many more games in Spain's top flight. His age, lack of appearances post-2000, and retirement in 2009, they are all pretty much the same thing actually, prevent him from featuring higher, despite being arguably the second most talented player in this 7, but Figo deservedly gets us started regardless. 6th, Alexis Sanchez. Speaking of players who have started to become increasingly underrated in recent years, though Alexis Sanchez and David Beckham don't have a great deal in common, I think that might be one similarity. The fact that Sanchez's move to Manchester United went so badly wrong after the Red Devils made him by far the highest paid player in the division, and he has never reached his former heights since that setback, seems to have coloured a lot of people's perceptions of the Chilean. It is almost as though the fact that Sanchez was arguably the best player in the Premier League for the 3.5 years up to that point, and certainly among the top 3, hence why Manchester United were willing to make him the league's highest earner, just sort of gets forgotten. Well, not on this channel. Alexis, I am here to give you your dues, which probably means more to you than the £500,000 a week that you were paid for being not very good at Manchester United. What was so strange about Sanchez's time at Old Trafford was that he lacked any kind of a spark, aggression or ingenuity, the 3 things that had made him so great up to that point. Fast, agile, brilliant on the ball and deadly in the final third, Sanchez made his first team debut at the age of only 16, and by 19, he was already starring in Europe for Udinese. A move to Barcelona followed, then the best team in Europe, where Sanchez made 83 goal contributions in only 141 appearances, winning 6 trophies in 3 seasons. It was only the arrival of Neymar that rendered Sanchez surplus to requirements at the Camp Nou, and for the next 3.5 years, he just about managed to keep Arsenal relevant. Now aged 34, and back playing for Inter Milan, following an impressive season at Marseille. Because of how young he started, Sanchez has already played an incredible 916 games. Some 160 of those have come for Chile at international level, who Sanchez inspired to both the 2015 and the 2016 Copa America. All things considered, it would be madness if he didn't feature. 5th, Angel Di Maria. This seems harsh on Angel Di Maria, but it's only due to the genius of the 4 men up next. Oddly, Di Maria and Sanchez also have one thing in common, and that is that they are sometimes underrated by virtue of their disappointing spells at Manchester United. The reality, however, for the last decade, is that almost everyone is rubbish at Manchester United, so that's not really any way of judging a player. What's more, much as that may be the perception, and his time at Manchester United, the least successful of his career, Di Maria wasn't actually rubbish at all at Old Trafford. In 32 appearances, he scored 4 goals and made 12 assists while playing in 6 different positions. Cesc Fabregas and Santi Cazorla were the only players with more assists in the Premier League that season. In happier times, Di Maria made his name at Rosario Central, then in Europe with Benfica. He won it all at Real Madrid and PSG, and now he is back at Benfica at 35. Quick, skillful, incredibly hard-working and creative, Di Maria illustrated the range to his game when he enjoyed one of his best ever seasons at Real Madrid, as they won the Champions League in his final season in the Spanish capital. That summer, Di Maria was also Argentina's second most important player as they reached the final of the World Cup, and I thought that he was a little bit hard done by to only finish 10th in Ballon d'Or voting. In total, Di Maria has made a whopping 874 appearances, almost exclusively at the very highest level, exhibiting freakish consistency throughout that time, and he shows few signs of letting up now, age 35, having made 9 goal contributions in his first 14 games back at Benfica. 4th, Arjen Robben. The ultimate modern-day wide man, Arjen Robben was a left-footed right winger who was quick, brilliant on the ball, loved to cut inside, and rifle the ball into the far corner of the goal. That was his trademark. Everyone knew that he wanted to do it pretty much every time he received the ball, but for 20 years, still no one learnt how to stop him. Almost impossible to defend against in one-on-one situations, most teams would double up on Robben, which in turn would create room for the likes of Franck Ribéry and Thomas Muller to cause havoc. Throughout his career, Robben scored 209 goals and made 165 assists at club level, and he scored a further 37 goals from 96 caps for the Netherlands, with whom he reached the World Cup final in 2010 as one of the best players at the tournament. If there is one thing that holds Robben back from the podium places in this seven, aside from, all of the diving and the fact that there is still a warrant out for his arrest in Mexico on account of having robbed an entire nation, it is the persistent injury problems that he had from the age of about 26 onwards. Robben suffered a fairly remarkable 58 separate injuries, which caused him to miss at least one game, sidelining him for a grand total of more than 4 years and causing him to miss almost 250 matches. That is almost a third of his entire career, and it means that Robben only played 614 games at club level. Nonetheless, those 614 were of a high enough calibre to earn him a spot in fourth. Third, Gareth Bale. At his peak, I think that Gareth Bale was a better footballer than the man up next, but as with Robben, injuries were the bane of Bale's life. Lightning quick and electric to watch, Tottenham tried to offload Bale not long after signing him from Southampton because he was a left-back who couldn't defend. Bale didn't want to leave though, and Spurs would soon be eternally grateful for his stubbornness. Once Harry Redknapp moved him further forward, the Welshman became an absolute animal. His 2012-13 season, which was his last at White Hart Lane, I would maintain is still one of the single greatest individual seasons that a player has ever had in the Premier League. Bale made 40 goal contributions in 44 games that season in a Spurs team that finished 5th, largely because of him. Over the course of his career as a whole, Bale scored 186 goals and made 137 assists in 554 appearances at club level, as well as becoming Wales's all-time record appearance holder and goalscorer with 41 goals from 111 caps. From the age of 30, Bale was absolutely ravaged by injuries, and his relationship with Real Madrid fans went from a little bit frosty to outright sour. At his best, however, he was one of the best players in the world, and probably one of only 2 or 3 players, along with Neymar and Luis Suarez maybe, around a decade ago, who ever looked like they could even entertain the idea of threatening the duopoly of Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Bale would never quite reach those heights and had nowhere near the longevity of those two, but he had 9 seasons in which he was absolutely outstanding, and he scored a raft of enormous goals in massive moments at both club and international level. Second, Mohamed Salah. I don't think that Mohamed Salah is as good at football as Gareth Bale was, but among the most important abilities in football is availability, and there, the Egyptian wipes the floor with the real Prince of Wales. Though 3 years younger than Bale, and still starring at the highest level now, whilst Bale has already retired, Salah already has made more appearances. Not unlike Bale, it took Salah a little bit of time to get going after joining one of the Premier League's rich 6. In fact, Salah never got going at his first Premier League club, Chelsea, who signed him after he had twice punished them for Basel. A single season in Serie A with Roma, following a loan spell at Fiorentina, was all it took to earn Salah a Premier League return though, as Liverpool signed him for a potential £43 million in the summer of 2017. At the time, there were some who questioned whether Liverpool might have overspent. More than 6 years on, it looks like one of the bargains of the century. Relentless, rapid, and overflowing with self-belief, it's not just that Salah rarely misses a game, he is freakishly consistent and productive in the final third. In his first season at Anfield, Salah scored 44 goals, which is practically unheard of in English football during the 21st century, or at least it was until the Norwegian meat shield came along. Salah's total of 275 goals and 136 assists from 573 appearances at club level, combined with his 55 goals from 95 caps for Egypt, cannot be overlooked. He is a special player, and given that he's also the youngest player in this 7, his spot in second is fairly remarkable. In fact, at the age of only 31, if it wasn't for who the man up next is, I would say that he had a decent chance of one day taking top spot. 0. Honourable mentions. I had a long shortlist for this one, but I'll try to make it brief. The players who came closest to featuring were David Beckham, Riyad Mahrez, Raheem Sterling, and most notably of all, I would say, actually Pedro. The Spaniard wasn't or isn't as gifted as some of the other honourable mentions, or any of the 7 themselves, but when you look at the number of games that he played, along with his consistency and productivity, he can probably consider himself a little bit unfortunate to miss out to Figo, even if there is absolutely zero comparison in terms of their peaks or talent. Other honourable mentions go to the likes of Freddie Ljungberg, Jakub Błaszczykowski, Antonio Valencia, Theo Walcott, Jesus Navas, Lucas Moura, Mauro Camoranesi, Luis Garcia, Domenico Berardi, Joaquin, and Ricardo Quaresma. That is it for the honourable mentions, but there is still time for perhaps the most predictable top spot in the history of HITC Sevens. First, Lionel Messi. The only way that you wouldn't know Lionel Messi was going to top this 7 is if you weren't quite sure whether he played more games on the right or through the middle. I suppose I have just answered that question if you were unsure, though it is fairly close. Messi made just over 50% of his club appearances on the right flank, compared to about 44% as a second striker or centre forward. He would have topped whichever 7 he had been put in, obviously, and though it feels somewhat needless, I will just very quickly justify that decision. Age 36, and now starring for Inter Miami in Major League Soccer, 1 year on from finally getting his hands on the World Cup, Messi has scored a career total of 821 goals and has made 361 assists in 1,047 senior career appearances. In other words, Messi has made more goal contributions than any other player in this 7 has made appearances, and he is still playing. And he has also scored more goals, forgetting even assists, than his closest competitors, namely Bale, Salah and Robben, have made total appearances as well. Beyond the numbers, Messi is the best dribbler, passer of a ball, and goal scorer of my lifetime, and the best when it comes to combining all 3, I would argue, in the entire history of the sport. I won't reel off his accolades because we would be here all week. Besides, you can throw your 8 Ballon d'Ors in the biggest bin you can find now, Lionel. The real prizes come in. Alfie from HITC Sevens has just named you as the greatest right winger of the 21st century. Well, that is it for today's video, which both started and ended with 2 very different Argentines. Funnily enough, according to a poll last December, if Messi had stood for president in Argentina, he would have won by a landslide, as first preference with 36.7% of voters. Javier Milei, who actually won the election, would have been reduced to second place with a paltry 12%. So, if you really think about it, Messi has effectively facilitated the far right coming to power in Argentina, all because he'd rather kick a ball about in Miami than lead a country of 46 million people. I mean, pull your finger out, Lionel. The world's at stake. You've completed football. 7th, Sadio Mane. This is slightly unusual timing because Sadio Mane is a man in the news right now, though not for his talents on the pitch. Mane, age 31, is reported to have just married his long-term 19-year-old girlfriend at a secret ceremony in Senegal.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
Mane allegedly began courting his new wife, Aisha Temba, when she was just 16 years old, which, isn't that long-term, while keeping the relationship secret until their marriage. That is according to Sports Brief and Mail Sport. There have been other reports claiming that she is 26, but it seems as though they have since been disproven, and she is indeed 19. I'd say that it is sussy at best and criminal at worst, but as I said, the sole criteria for this series is the quality and quantity of a player's performances since 2000, not the dubiousness of their personal lives, otherwise the entire thing would look very different. On the pitch, Mane's career has been a remarkable rags-to-riches tale. Having come through the youth ranks at Generation Foot, he began life in Europe with Metz's B team in the 4th tier of French football, departing for Red Bull Salzburg after Metz's first team were relegated from Ligue 2. From Salzburg, Mane joined Southampton, but it is his 6 seasons at Liverpool that constitutes his peak and the primary reason why he gets us started in this 7, ahead of several other distinguished left-wingers. I must admit, When Liverpool paid £34 million to sign Mane, rising to £36 million subject to add-ons in 2016, I thought that was probably the upper end of what he was worth. How wrong I was. Not only did Mane score 120 goals and make 48 assists during his time at Anfield, they actually managed to sell him at 30 for almost the same price that they had signed him for at 24. It would be fair to say that Mane wasn't as good of a signing for Bayern Munich, but thankfully, the Saudis were on hand to sign him for almost as much as they paid for him as well. At his peak, Mane was almost unstoppable at times. So dynamic and direct, while Salah was always the star of Liverpool's famed front three, Mane routinely produced equally pivotal goals and moments. Quick, tireless, and capable of scoring goals with either foot or his head, Mane won the Premier League and the Champions League at Liverpool, making 4 appearances in the PFA Team of the Year in the process. He won the 2021 AFCON, is a 2-time African Footballer of the Year, and, most notably of all of course, he's now won an Arab Club Champions Cup as well. Combine all of that with the fact that Mane's entire career, all 635 appearances to date, have come post-2000, and it is just, and I really do mean just enough, to see him get us started, despite having a new wife who was born after his hairline had already begun receding. 6th, Ryan Giggs. Look, alright, as I said, the criteria isn't the moral dubiousness of a player's personal life. I really can't reiterate that enough at several stages throughout this video. Obviously, Ryan Giggs was a phenomenal left winger, left-sided midfielder, and later deep-lying playmaker or central midfielder. In fact, as a left winger, I'd say that only the top 3 players in this 7 can even hold a candle to him. So why is he only in 6th? Well, put simply, Giggs turned 27 in 2000 and he made his Manchester United first team debut in 1991. That means that 8.5 whole seasons, during which time Giggs played over 400 matches, won 16 trophies, including the Continental Treble, and made 2 of his 6 PFA Team of the Year inclusions, have to be excluded. Under any ordinary circumstances, on that basis alone, Giggs wouldn't have a hope in hell of featuring in this series. And yet, the fact that he played into his 40s, and he didn't just play, he played 32 times in a Premier League title-winning Manchester United team in his penultimate season as a 40-year-old, means that Giggs still did enough post-2000, for my money at least, to earn an inclusion in 6th. Not long into the 2000s, and certainly after turning 30, Giggs had to adapt his own game from being a quick and tricky menace on the left flank into being a more functional left-sided midfield player before gradually coming more and more central. He may well be a terrible human being, but as with so many players who enjoy great longevity, I think that Giggs' talents are routinely underplayed. It wasn't just that he played 934 games for Manchester United during an era in which they dominated English football, winning 13 Premier League titles over a 20-year time span. Giggs was also, arguably, the star of the so-called class of '92. Undoubtedly the most highly regarded during his teens, Giggs was the first to be called up into the first team. He was considered to be Manchester United's star man, probably from about 1997 onwards, after Eric Cantona's retirement, for at least the next 6 or 7 years, and, on the pitch at least, he never let his standards drop. So gifted, so disciplined, and so intelligent, again, I can't stress this enough, on the pitch, I mean, Giggs was a dream for Sir Alex Ferguson, who named him as one of only 4 definitively world-class players that he ever managed, alongside Cantona, Ronaldo and Scholes. If his entire career came post-2000, he would make the top 3. As it is, still with over 500 post-2000 appearances in the bank, he deservedly takes 6th. 5th, Son Heung-min. Easy to overlook in a list or series of this ilk, Son Heung-min may still only be 31, he may have won fewer trophies than Ryan Giggs did in an average season, and he might have never been the poster boy of the Premier League or even of Tottenham, at least prior to this season, following Harry Kane's departure, but on quality and quantity of appearances, which is the stated criteria, he becomes very difficult to overlook. Son is just a brilliant all-round forward. He can play on the left or through the middle, either as a 9, 10 or false 9. He works tirelessly and presses relentlessly, and he is technically superb, whether that be on the ball, in the pass, or when striking at goal. It's a very useful combination, and it's one that has resulted in Son scoring a tremendous 222 goals and making 99 assists in 591 games at club level for Hamburg, Bayer Leverkusen and Tottenham, in addition to scoring 41 goals from 117 caps for South Korea, where he is practically a deity, never mind just a poster boy. What's more, I say that Son has never been the Premier League or maybe until now Tottenham's poster boy, and that is true, but don't forget that he won the 2021-22 Premier League Golden Boot jointly with Mohamed Salah, and he won the Tottenham Player of the Season award 3 times, which is a quite frankly remarkable achievement during the Harry Kane era. Since the Best Footballer in Asia award launched in 2013, Son Heung-min has won it 8 times, meanwhile players not called Son Heung-min have won it a combined total of 2 times. That's absurd. So Son takes 5th. 4th, Franck Ribéry. Honestly, I don't know what it is with footballers who played or who play on the left wing, but some of the best of them really do have blotted copybooks. Ribéry, of course, in 2010, was indicted by a judge alongside Karim Benzema for solicitation of a minor prostitute. At the time of the alleged crime, Benzema was 21 and Ribéry was 26. The girl involved, Zahia De Gea, was only 16, which is the age of consent in France, but prostitution is only legal from the age of 18. Ribéry and Benzema admitted to having paid for sex with De Gea, who was 10 years Ribéry's junior, but the two were eventually acquitted in 2014 after a court concluded that they were unaware that Zahia was underage. Again, this series, I cannot reiterate it enough, isn't a moral assessment. On the pitch, Ribéry is an interesting player to assess. On the one hand, he was touted as Zinedine Zidane's heir apparent following the 2006 World Cup as a genuinely world-class prospect who could inspire France to major trophies just like Zizou. Ultimately, that final in 2006 alongside Zidane was by far the closest that Ribéry ever came to tasting international success, enduring more scandals than trophies. France went out in the group stage at Euro 2008 and at the 2010 World Cup. He was uninspiring at Euro 2012, and he missed the 2014 World Cup through injury. After his international retirement in 2014, France reached the final of the next 2 major tournaments, winning the 2018 World Cup. On the flip side, Ribéry had a magnificent club career, the majority of it, 12 years, spent at Bayern Munich. Incredibly gifted, Ribéry was a joy to watch, capable of jinking past fullbacks for fun, and equally adept at scoring and creating goals. He came 3rd in 2013 Ballon d'Or voting, after winning a continental treble at Bayern, trailing only Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Ribéry had a very hard time with injuries, particularly after turning 30, but he still managed to make 715 appearances at club level, all post-2000 of course, plus 81 caps for France, and they were of a sufficient standard that I think he deserves to take 4th, and only narrowly misses out on our podium. 3rd, Eden Hazard. Franck Ribéry was an exceptional footballer who had a majestic trophy-laden club career, but the top 3 of this 7 were or are a class above the rest. Sadly, it is a were in the case of Eden Hazard, despite the fact that he only just turned 33 years old. Hazard retired at the end of last season, age 32, and, in truth, has played very little football and looked a shadow of his former self whenever he did, since his 2019 transfer to Real Madrid when he was only 28 years old. I think Hazard is one of only probably 2 or maybe 3 footballers who, had they really wanted to, and had they been blessed with a bit of good fortune, could have rivaled Messi and Ronaldo during an era dominated by those 2. The truth, however, is that Hazard was never as ruthless, efficient, dedicated, or hard-working as either Messi or Ronaldo, and whilst that is often held up as being a bad thing, everyone has different priorities. So for Messi and Ronaldo, that might have been trophies, goals, Ballon d'Ors, accolades, but for Hazard, it was Burger King. Hazard has I jest of course, right? Hazard has spoken openly about this in the past, and though he could have achieved more, had greater longevity, and probably avoided a lot of the injuries that he suffered after signing for Real Madrid, it's important to focus on what, despite all of those things, Hazard still managed to achieve. A wizard with a ball at his feet and an obvious superstar right from his debut at Lille, Hazard inspired Lille to an unlikely Ligue 1 and Coupe de la Ligue double in the 2010-11 season as a 20-year-old. And after successive Ligue 1 Player of the Year awards at only 21, he had the pick of just about any club in Europe. He chose Chelsea, the reigning European champions, and over the entire span of his 7 seasons at Stamford Bridge, I don't think that there was a better player in the Premier League. Certainly, none won more Man of the Match awards. Injuries and a very early retirement conspired to limit Hazard to just 635 club appearances and 126 caps for Belgium, despite making a very early start. But the quality and quantity of his performances, prior to his last 76 at Real Madrid at least, are enough to see him take a very deserved bronze medal. Second, Neymar. As good as Eden Hazard was, I don't think that he ever could have been as good as Neymar. The second most gifted player of his generation, as far as I'm concerned, there haven't been many people in the entire history of football who have been able to do the things that Neymar can with a ball at his feet. A boy wonder at Santos, Neymar hadn't even turned 16 yet, or made his first team debut, when the comparisons with Pelé began. That's a poison chalice that has swallowed up several supposed wonder kids over the years, but Neymar was always different. Whilst he might not be Pelé, that is an almost impossible standard, Neymar has been Brazil's star man virtually his entire career, and he has exceeded Pelé in one respect at least, becoming Brazil's all-time leading goalscorer. Neymar has scored 79 goals in 128 games for Brazil, and at club level, he has struck 360 times, in addition to making more than 200 assists in 589 appearances. In other words then, Neymar has averaged 1 goal contribution per game virtually his entire career, on top of being one of the most elaborate and skillful players on the planet. Neymar's 589 club appearances is actually quite a lot for a 31-year-old, but it is heavily skewed towards his early years. Following his world record-breaking move to PSG, which made him, and indeed still makes him, the most expensive footballer of all time, Neymar averaged less than 29 games a season and less than 19 in the league. And since joining Al Hilal in the Saudi Pro League, he has unfortunately ruptured his ACL. Nonetheless, by almost any metric, whether that be ability, peak, or indeed the actual criteria, quality and quantity of appearances, Neymar couldn't come anywhere other than second. 0. Honourable mentions. I promise to be brief, but it would be remiss of me not to, as always, give a quick shout out to some very honourable mentions. Players who missed out primarily by virtue of being too old and not having freakish longevity like Ryan Giggs, despite being brilliant footballers, include the likes of Pavel Nedved and Robert Pires. Meanwhile, Harry Kewell might have had a shot if he was both a little bit younger and hadn't been quite so blighted by injuries. Those who are too young, or more to the point, have played slightly too few games yet to feature, include Leroy Sané and Vinicius Jr., and others who made my shortlist but just missed out on the final 7 include the likes of Willian, Dries Mertens, Stefan El Shaarawy, Ashley Young, Nani, Dimitri Payet, Florent Malouda, Dusan Tadic, Wilfred Zaha, Kingsley Coman, and, perhaps most notably of all, Raheem Sterling. In case any of you were wondering, because I was when I began researching this, Kylian Mbappe has played more games as a centre-forward, or at least in a central attacking role, than he has done on the left wing, and he will therefore only be considered for the centre-forward video rather than this one. And now for the small matter of an extremely predictable top spot. First, Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo is the greatest left winger since 2000. In fact, the only caveat, or doubt that there could be over that fact, is whether he had played more games through the middle or on the left, but unlike in the case of Mbappe, Ronaldo played, or has played, more games on the left than anywhere else. It feels a little bit unnecessary justifying this, or giving the 1 millionth synopsis of Cristiano Ronaldo's career, but I'll give it a stab nonetheless. Ronaldo actually made his name at Manchester United on the right wing, becoming not just the best right winger, but the best player in the Premier League, at least in his last 2 seasons at the club. In his debut campaign at Real Madrid, after becoming the most expensive footballer on the planet, Ronaldo played predominantly through the middle, yet it would be by far his lowest scoring season at the Bernabeu. It is worth pointing out that in, by far, Ronaldo's worst goal-scoring season in Madrid, he still scored 33 goals. Jose Mourinho arrived in the summer of 2010 and, for the first time, Ronaldo began playing regularly on the left flank, though always coming inside and looking to shoot on goal. Towards the end of his time in Madrid, Ronaldo had started to come central once again as his ability to run in behind and beat players began to wane, but the left channel remained and still remains a favourite of his to exploit. Basically the perfect inclusion in this series. Ronaldo's career began in 2002, he is still playing in 2024, on the verge of turning 39, and he has played over 1,000 games at club level, exhibiting abnormal consistency levels throughout that time, scoring 745 goals and making over 230 assists, in addition to scoring 128 goals from 205 caps for Portugal, which makes him the record goal scorer and appearance holder in the history of men's international football. Hopefully that justifies his position in top spot then, for the maybe 3 people watching this who might have had even an ounce of doubt about it. And after all of the problematic and morally dubious left wingers that have featured in this video, it sure is nice to have someone who's never been credibly accused of anything like that in top spot. Wait. What? Oh, for crying out loud. 7th, Sergio Aguero. It would be fair to say that we get off to a strong start, though it must be said that Sergio Aguero only features by the narrowest of margins. Aguero's spot in this 7 might be a little safer had he not been forced to retire from football due to heart problems a little over 2 years ago, shortly after joining Barcelona, aged 33. But you have to remember that Aguero started out incredibly young, and his entire career has of course been post-2000. Aguero made his first team debut for Independiente in 2003, aged only 15, becoming the youngest player in the history of the Argentine Primera Division in the process. The record that he broke, incidentally, was Diego Maradona's, which had stood for almost 27 years until then. Aguero won the 2005 Under-20 World Cup with Argentina alongside Lionel Messi, and in 2007, he won it again, this time as Argentina's star man. At 17, he joined Atletico Madrid, and a couple of months later, having just turned 18, he made his senior debut for Argentina, who had strikers coming out of their ears at the time. Following a season settling in Atletico, Aguero came into his own in his second season, following Fernando Torres' departure, stepping out of the Spaniards' rather large shadow to score 27 goals in a single season while still aged only 18. In 2011, Aguero joined Manchester City, despite firm interest from both Real Madrid and Barcelona. He went on to become the Citizens' all-time record goal scorer and, arguably, the club's greatest player of all time, scoring 260 goals in 390 games, including that goal over 10 seasons, during which time he won 15 trophies. A born centre-forward, Aguero was diminutive, stocky and explosive, reminiscent in some ways, though I'm not saying he was as good, of Gerd Müller. He had a lovely range of finishes in his arsenal, and under Pep Guardiola, despite some initial reservations and doubts, he transformed beautifully into an all-round centre-forward who could link play and hardly ever stopped running. Little niggling short-term injuries plagued Aguero's playing days, preventing him from ever having a 50-plus game season post-Atletico, but when he did play 786 times for club and country, all post-2000 again, he was invariably brilliant, and that is just about enough to earn him a spot in 7th. 6th, Karim Benzema. Perennially underrated, at least until Cristiano Ronaldo left Real Madrid, and he took on the mantle of being the main man for arguably the biggest club in all of world football, there was simply no way, even though he is still playing, that Karim Benzema could miss out on this 7 based upon the stated criteria. As with Aguero, Benzema broke through very young and was touted as a superstar from his early to mid-teens. Following 15 goals in 20 games for Lyon's second team in the third tier of French football, Benzema was fast-tracked straight into the first team at 16. He made his senior debut shortly after turning 17, but it was in the 2007-08 season that Benzema announced himself as one of the best centre-forwards in Europe, scoring 31 goals in 52 games as Lyon won the double and Benzema collected the Ligue 1 Player of the Year award. Benzema joined Real Madrid during the same summer as Kaká and Cristiano Ronaldo for consecutive world-breaking fees, and that meant, for the next 9 years at least, Benzema wouldn't be the star man. Throughout this time, a lot of people like to propagate the idea that Benzema was being carried by Ronaldo. While it wouldn't be accurate to say that the reality was the opposite, Ronaldo was the best player at Real Madrid, there is no doubt of that, it certainly was the case that Ronaldo couldn't have dreamed of having a better or more unselfish strike partner throughout his best years, and it's little wonder that he cites Benzema as his best attacking partner, ahead of Wayne Rooney, who was also incredibly industrious and unselfish. It's worth noting that Benzema still put up outstanding numbers alongside Ronaldo. They were just dwarfed by Ronaldo's freakish output, but it was after Ronaldo left the Bernabeu that it perhaps dawned on people who hadn't been paying close attention what Benzema was really capable of. The 2021-22 season was Benzema's magnum opus, as he struck 44 times in 46 games, inspiring Real Madrid to a La Liga, Champions League and Spanish Super Cup winning treble, which deservedly saw him collect his first and only Ballon d'Or. The one blemish on Benzema's record, you could argue, as a player at least, excluding his routinely blemished personal life, is his lack of international achievements. Exiled from the national team because of those issues in his personal life for 6 years, Benzema's only notable international achievement came in the 2021-22 Nations League, though he did still score 37 goals from 97 caps for Les Bleus, despite his extended hiatus. All told, Benzema has scored 469 goals and made over 200 assists in 913 career appearances at club and international level to date, spending his entire career, until this season, competing at the very highest level and exhibiting remarkable consistency throughout that time. 6th is the minimum that he deserves. 5th, Wayne Rooney. Mentioned only a moment ago as Cristiano Ronaldo's second favourite strike partner, it's weird to sometimes watch history being rewritten in real time. For the best part of a decade, Wayne Rooney was unanimously considered to be England's best and most important player. When Rooney was injured, for example, going into the 2010 World Cup, you would do well to find a soul who wouldn't have said that he was the one England player that fans didn't want to miss that tournament, ahead of Lampard, Gerrard, or anyone else. Rooney broke through at Everton at the age of 16 like nothing you'd ever seen before. Though he was still only a boy, he was built like a man. When he scored his first Premier League goal against Arsenal 5 days before turning 17, he was already Everton's star man. Lightning quick, powerful, inventive, and oozing with confidence, Rooney was arguably the best player at Euro 2004, still aged only 18. I remember in England's opening game of that tournament against France, which I was at, he made the likes of William Gallas, Lilian Thuram and Claude Makélélé, world-class players, look like second-rate ones, bouncing off them in challenges and winding his way between them for fun. I still think that, were it not for his injury against Portugal in the quarter-finals, in a game that England went on to lose on penalties, England could well have won that Euros. That same summer, Rooney joined Manchester United, and who could forget his hat-trick on his Champions League debut against Fenerbahce. That set the tone for what was to come, and though Rooney was incredibly prolific when played as a 9, his love of the game saw him perennially drop deep, preferring, personally, to play as a 10 or on either wing. That impacted Rooney's output, ultimately, compared to the rest of this 7, as did his early demise, likely due to burnout. But he still managed to become the all-time leading goalscorer for both Manchester United and England, arguably the biggest club in world football and the oldest national team on the planet. He has since been overtaken for England by Harry Kane. Rooney was at his best when he played on the edge, always seemingly on the verge of either scoring an absolute screamer or getting sent off, but there was much more to his game than just that. A brilliant all-round forward who could play anywhere in a front three and perhaps even in midfield at times. The great confusion with Rooney is that he became one of the greatest players of his generation, yet there is still just a nagging sense that he could have been even more. At 18, there's no doubt that he was a bigger talent than Cristiano Ronaldo and had achieved more at that age than Lionel Messi. Rooney never reached the heights of those two, nor did he enjoy anything like the longevity, for reasons that we need not get into. But at his best, he was the best player in the Premier League, among the best in the world, and I think that he is a solid shout for a spot at least in 5th. 4th, Thierry Henry. Alright, Arsenal fans, put your pitchforks down for a moment and allow me to explain. Thierry Henry is the best player and the best forward in this 7. Once again, if I were ranking this series on the ability of all players to have played in every position since 2000, or the best peaks in every position since 2000, he would be 2nd in this 7, trailing only the Brazilian Ronaldo, who doesn't even feature. So Henry's spot in 4th isn't a comment on his ability or his peak, but more so simply on the fact that he is 46 years old. Henry therefore began his professional career in 1994, giving him 6 years of ineligible football, including his triumph with France at the 1998 World Cup. And though all of Henry's best football came post-2000, hence he still features in this incredibly competitive 7 all the way up in 4th, he joined the New York Red Bulls in 2010 and retired from football in 2014. That means we've only got 14 years to go on, and only 10 at the highest level, which is only a couple more than Kylian Mbappe, just to put it in some context. Those 10 years at the highest level were nothing short of extraordinary though. In my eyes, the greatest player of the Premier League era, no one has come close either before or since to replicating Henry's aura. Never has a Premier League player been more universally feared and respected by opponents, and it's easy to see why. An absolute nightmare to defend against, Henry had it all. Blistering pace, equally quick feet, flair in spades, endless invention, boundless creativity, a ferocious fighting spirit, and a remarkably sharp eye for goal. He was even half decent with his hands. The end result was a player who, in 8 seasons at Arsenal, became the Gunners' all-time leading goalscorer, making the PFA Team of the Year an incredible 6 times, and winning 4 Premier League Golden Boots. Given that Henry missed much of his last season at Arsenal through injury, that means that in 6 out of his 7 full seasons in the Premier League, he made the Team of the Year, and in over half of them, he won the division's Golden Boot, this in the era of Van Nistelrooy, Shearer, Owen and Drogba. After that, Henry spent 3 seasons at Barcelona, the latter 2 in Pep Guardiola's immortal team, in which, for the first time in a decade, he was no longer the main man. It's really only the quantity aspect of the criteria that limits Henry to a spot in 4th then, as the 2000s began when he was already 22, and he joined New York Red Bulls at 32. Nonetheless, he had to feature. And hopefully you'll understand when you see the top 3 why he couldn't quite crack the podium given those considerations. 3rd, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I think Thierry Henry was a better footballer who had a better peak than Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but in terms of the quality and quantity of a player's performances post-2000, Ibrahimovic was almost tailor-made for this series. The towering Swede broke into the Malmo first team in 1999, enjoying his breakout campaign in 2000. He retired some 23 years later, following 4 years back at AC Milan, having scored 573 goals in 988 games at club and international level. During the intervening period, Ibrahimovic won league titles in 4 different countries, was nominated for the Ballon d'Or on a whopping 11 occasions, won the Serie A Foreign Footballer of the Year award 5 times, the Serie A Footballer of the Year award 3 times, the Ligue 1 Player of the Year award also 3 times, and he became PSG's all-time leading goalscorer just 3.5 years after joining the club. He also joined Barcelona in 2009 for what was effectively a world record-breaking fee. He made the MLS Best 11 in both of his seasons in Los Angeles, and he scored 28 goals in 46 games for Manchester United, aged 35, despite having had many doubters who thought that he would be past his best. A magnificent athlete, Ibrahimovic is 6'5" tall, but brilliant with the ball at his feet. He was strong, agile, acrobatic, creative, and capable of scoring every variation of finish imaginable. He was also deceptively quick. Not the quickest off the mark, but when Ibrahimovic got up to full speed, few defenders could keep up with him. Combine it all and you have something resembling the perfect centre-forward, which is why Ibrahimovic is the 4th highest goal scorer of the 21st century, and the 2nd highest in this 7, trailing only the man up next. Second, Robert Lewandowski. I imagine that most people would shuffle the top 3 in this 7 based upon personal preference, though I don't think there can be any doubt about them being the 3 based upon the criteria, and I came very close to putting Robert Lewandowski top. The only player in this 7 who is still playing at the very highest level, age 35, Lewandowski is the highest scoring centre-forward of the 21st century and the 3rd highest goal scorer overall, behind the inevitable Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. That is a pretty impressive achievement, especially given that Lewandowski isn't done yet, along with the fact that he didn't really get going until a little bit later than the likes of Ibrahimovic, Rooney, and Aguero. Don't get me wrong, Lewandowski was by no means a late bloomer. He made his senior international debut with Poland within a month of turning 20, but his breakout campaign at the highest level, namely his 2nd season at Borussia Dortmund, didn't come until he was 23 years old. That's not late by any means, but it gave him a little bit of catching up to do against such elite level competition who were competing or indeed winning golden boots in their teams. Lewandowski swallowed that ground up with ease though. In the 11 seasons since that breakout campaign, Lewandowski has averaged over 40 goals a season. Averaged. If a striker scores 40 goals in a season once in their career, that is a phenomenal achievement. To average more than that over an entire decade, every season, is absurd. Lewandowski's most prolific campaign came in the 2019-20 season, in which he scored 55 goals in only 47 games, as Bayern Munich won a European treble. And only the strange decision not to award a Ballon d'Or that year due to COVID denied him of a near certain first and only crown. Lewandowski deserved that title in some ways, just as Benzema deserved his crowning moment in 2022, having performed consistently at such a high level for so long, but having routinely been denied such accolades due to the relentless brilliance of Messi and Ronaldo. Lewandowski made the Bundesliga team of the season 9 times and was the division's highest scorer on 7 occasions. In his first season at Barcelona, after leaving Bayern Munich, Lewandowski was, unsurprisingly, the top scorer in La Liga as well, winning the Pichichi Trophy. Perhaps not as silky or as gifted as some of the other forwards in this 7, Lewandowski is an incredibly efficient and fine-tuned number 9. He's a good athlete, his movement and anticipation are second to none, his first touch is sharp, he's excellent in the air, and his finishing is out of this world. A career total of 669 goals in 969 games and still counting is a reflection of that fact, plus over 150 assists. Lewandowski is the 2nd highest scorer in the history of the Bundesliga, behind the late great Gerd Müller. He ranks 3rd behind only Messi and Ronaldo in the all-time Champions League scoring charts, and he is the 4th highest European goal scorer in the history of men's international football, soon to be 3rd, despite playing for far from an elite-level powerhouse on the international stage in the form of Poland. And of course, all of this came post-2000. A podium position was guaranteed, and he takes 2nd place for me. 0. Honourable mentions. Obviously, I mentioned most of the honourable mentions in that long, tedious, and rambling introduction, if you can remember that far back now. If you can, then you'll also remember that I only named players who didn't make my second shortlist of 14, from which I selected my final 7. Those 7 remaining honourable mentions, therefore, who came closest to featuring, in no particular order, were Didier Drogba, Samuel Eto'o, David Villa, Raul Gonzalez, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Harry Kane, and Francesco Totti. Totti, Raul, and Van Nistelrooy, it should be said, all played a fair bit of football prior to 2000, which obviously counted against them. Meanwhile, Kane is the youngest of my final 14, still aged only 30, yet he was perhaps the closest to featuring. Kane is already England's all-time leading goalscorer, with 62 goals from 89 caps. He has already outscored the likes of Rooney, Falcao, Drogba, Tevez and Van Persie in terms of career goals, and in his debut campaign in the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich, Kane is already scoring goals at the same rate as Robert Lewandowski at his very best, despite being in a much less dominant team. What's more, as impressive as the stats are, Kane is so much more than merely a great goalscorer. His hold-up play, passing, crossing, and creativity are of the calibre of a world-class number 10, so he can consider himself somewhat unfortunate to miss out. I've no doubt not only that Kane would make this 7 in probably only 12 months' time, but that by the time he retires, he will either be in or will be threatening the podium places, usurping Aguero, Benzema, Rooney, and, on the basis of having played all of his games post-2000, probably Henry as well. As for the likes of Drogba, Eto'o and Villa, what can you say? Leaving them out was brutal, and all would be worthy candidates for 5th, 6th or 7th, but based upon the stated criteria, I just couldn't quite justify putting them ahead of Rooney, Benzema or Aguero, and, let's face it, whatever happened, I was always going to upset someone. Now for the small matter of top spots. First, Luis Suarez. There will be people out there who think that either Zlatan Ibrahimovic and or Robert Lewandowski were better centre-forwards than Luis Suarez, and I can understand all of those points of view. I don't think that there is a great deal in it, to be perfectly honest, but I will do my best to justify why I've put Suarez in top spot. As with those two, obviously, Suarez fits the criteria perfectly. A seasoned veteran now, age 37, whose entire career has come post-2000, and he has played an awful lot of football, suffering very few long-term injuries, during that time. In fact, most of Suarez's lengthiest spells on the sidelines have actually been the result of suspensions after he has bitten or racially abused someone.
Okay, but that's worse. I mean, you do get how that's worse, right?
Yes, I am aware that's worse. I was just providing some context. Suarez has so far scored a grand total of 557 goals in 938 games at club and international level, which puts him 4th in this millennium's scoring charts, trailing Ronaldo, Messi, Lewandowski, and very narrowly Ibrahimovic. In all probability, Suarez will overtake Ibrahimovic at Inter Miami, having recently joined the MLS side. One could argue that Lewandowski and Ibrahimovic have never had a season quite like Suarez's last at Liverpool, in which he scored 31 goals in 33 Premier League games, none of which came from the penalty spot, and almost dragged the Reds to a maiden Premier League era title. Had Suarez not been suspended at the start of that season, they almost certainly would have won it. You could also make the case that Suarez's peak, namely the 2015-16 season, was the most impressive of any of the 3 podium play strikers. Suarez scored 59 goals in 53 games that season, somehow managing to become the star man, in terms of goal scoring at least, in a front line containing Lionel, Messi and Neymar, and finally, after about 8 years, managing to dethrone Messi and Ronaldo as the highest scorer in Europe in a season. Suarez proved himself to be capable of both dragging a somewhat mediocre team to greatness and of starring alongside fellow superstars on the biggest of stages, performing consistently with remarkable longevity. Somewhat unorthodox technically, Suarez has a magnificent first touch, but his dribbling has routinely involved running into or in between players, or just into otherwise congested spaces, almost playing the ball off defenders at times, invariably getting the bounce of the ball, and coming out with it on the other end. To watch it once or twice, you might think that it was a fluke. To watch it 4 or 5 times a game, over almost 1,000 matches, spanning 2 whole decades, it's clear that it is anything but. Statistically, there is very little to split the top three. On the so-called eye test, I'd also argue that there isn't a great deal between them. It's more a matter of personal preference. When a decision is as close as that, I like to imagine that I'm picking a team, which is how we will conclude this series, and I can only pick one of the available options in that position. Across the millennium as a whole, and certainly at his peak, Suarez edges that for me, which is why he takes top spot. Honestly, that was a brutal 7 to compile, particularly whittling it down to 14 and then 7 just to begin with, and then ordering the 7 themselves. I really wouldn't argue with anyone who would have Drogba, Eto'o, or Villa in their 7s, or would order Ibrahimovic, Lewandowski and Suarez in any 1-2-3 combination, which just goes to show what a difficult 7 this was. Surprisingly, by far the trickiest in this series. I mean, Dave Kitson didn't even make the long list. 7th, Diego Simeone. Diego Simeone is a manager unlike any other in this 7, and indeed, almost any other in the modern era, and I suppose that you could say that in both a positive and a negative sense. Simeone is unusual not just tactically, as a modern coach who has absolutely no reservations about rejecting the notion of control as it is typically understood by most of his peers, but also in terms of his managerial journey. Having had 6 different clubs during his first 5 years in management, winning trophies with both Estudiantes and River Plate, Simeone looks set to go down as one of the greatest managerial journeymen of the modern era. Instead, he has become extremely abnormal, especially in the modern era, by staying at a single club for the last 12 plus years and counting, shaping that club in his own image. There is no other elite club in Europe that has stuck with a single head coach over the past decade and beyond, but in many ways, Simeone and Atletico Madrid are a match made in heaven. For a start, Simeone spent 5 seasons with Atleti over 2 separate stints during his playing days, winning both La Liga and the Copa del Rey. In management, his pragmatism and revelry in the role of an underdog is ideally suited to a team that will always be considered, at best, the 3rd biggest club domestically, behind Real Madrid and Barcelona. Indeed, when Simeone returned to Madrid, Atletico were 10th, having only won 6 of their opening 18 matches that season, and they had been relegated to the Segunda Division, in 1999, more recently than they had finished in the top 3 in La Liga. The fact that they have finished in the top 3 in every single one of their last 11 seasons under Simeone, therefore, is a testament to the fine job that he has done. In addition to the consistency that he has overseen, cementing Atleti's status as one of La Liga's big 3 and as a member of Europe's elite, Simeone has also guided the club to 2 La Liga titles, 2 Europa Leagues, a Copa del Rey, and 2 UEFA Champions League finals, both of which ended in painful defeats against their city rivals. Given the budget Simeone has had in Madrid and the players that he has had to cope with leaving during that time, contrasted with the relentless consistency that he and Atletico have shown, and the trophies that they have won, in an era where such successful and long-term managerial marriages in football are practically non-existent, I think that Simeone has to feature in this 7, and one could argue that he is even unfortunate to only feature in 7th. 6th, Arsene Wenger. Diego Simeone and Arsene Wenger are simultaneously very different and quite similar managers in a certain sense. Unlike Simeone, Wenger was very preoccupied with the aesthetics of the game and was frequently criticised for being too much of a football purist, an accusation which could never be thrown at the Argentine. But like Simeone, particularly during his last 10, 12 or even 14 years at Arsenal, Wenger had to compete against teams with much larger budgets while repeatedly losing his best players, and he did an excellent job in those circumstances. It is worth noting, of course, that a massive 16 years of Wenger's CV is entirely discarded for the purposes of this 7, including his success at Monaco and his first 4 years at Arsenal, which included a memorable Premier League and FA Cup double in the 1997-98 season, disrupting what would otherwise have been a run of 6 straight Premier League titles for Manchester United and Alex Ferguson. The battle between Ferguson and Wenger, and Man United and Arsenal more broadly during this period, was the stuff of legend. And in the early 2000s, Arsene's Arsenal reached yet new heights. A second League and Cup double arrived in 2002, and in the 2003-04 season, of course, Arsenal went invincible. The only team to have done so during the Premier League era, and one of only two, along with Preston North End, who managed it in the Football League's first ever season in 1888-89, to have done so during the entire history of English football's top flight. Though Wenger failed to win another Premier League title post-2004 during an additional 14 years in North London, the amount of money that Arsenal invested in the Emirates at the expense of investment in players and wages, combined with the arrival of Roman Abramovich at Chelsea and later the United Arab Emirates at Manchester City, made the likelihood of that happening very slim. Though Arsenal were mocked for it at the time, however, the fact that Wenger managed to retain Arsenal's top four and therefore Champions League status every season until his last two at the club was an outstanding achievement in those circumstances. Wenger features in this 7 and in 6, not only because of his achievements though, but also because of his broader impact upon the game. The most revolutionary manager in the modern history of English football, more so even than Alex Ferguson, I would contest. In terms of the way in which he changed the game, Wenger's focus on diet, training, professionalism and data rocked what was rapidly becoming the world's richest league. And where he went, everyone else followed. Admittedly, much of that was in the 90s when he first arrived, but his legacy continued well into the 2000s, which was also when he won the bulk of his trophies and pulled off his greatest achievements of all. So a spot in 6 for Wenger, who retired in 2018, feels about right to me. 5th, Jurgen Klopp. I've put Jurgen Klopp 5th in this 7, because that's where I think he deserves to be, but I'm about to make the case for why he should be top. Klopp's managerial journey began in February 2001, on the same day that he retired from playing the game, meaning that he has managed throughout almost the entirety of the 21st century, and during that time, I'm not really sure what more he could have done. The obvious answer, I suppose, is that he could have won more trophies. It's not as though he hasn't won anything, but certainly, the 4 men ahead of him in this 7 have all won more. None, however, have done what Klopp has done in terms of overachieving against teams with more resources on such a consistent basis with an almost flawless record. Klopp has only managed 3 different clubs in over 23 years, starting with 7 years at Mainz, followed by 7 years at Dortmund, and most recently Liverpool, who Klopp will leave behind in the summer, following almost 9 years in charge. Klopp inherited a Mainz team where he had spent the last decade playing either as a centre-back or centre-forward that was mired in a second Bundesliga relegation scrap. He won 6 out of his first 7 games in charge, as Mainz survived by 3 points. The following season, they finished 3rd, and in 2004, for the first time, they reached the Bundesliga. Mainz were relegated in 2007, following successive 11th place finishes in the top flight, but immediate promotion was enough to land Klopp the job at Borussia Dortmund, succeeding Thomas Doll after Dortmund had just finished 13th. It was 5 years since Dortmund's league finish had even qualified them for Europe, but in Klopp's first season, they climbed to 6th, then 5th, and in the 2010-11 season, they caused the upset of all upsets to dethrone Bayern Munich and lift the Bundesliga title. Klopp had assembled and developed an outstanding team, featuring the likes of Mats Hummels, Mario Götze, and Robert Lewandowski, and the following season, they only went and did it again, lifting the DFB Pokal this time as well, to make it a double. At Liverpool, Klopp took charge of a team that had finished 6th the previous season, and was 10th when he arrived midway through his debut campaign. In his first season, the Reds only climbed up to 8th, blighted by defensive errors, but they made it through to the final of both the Europa League and the League Cup. The following season, Liverpool finished 4th, and not until last season, when they finished 5th, would they miss out on Champions League football again. During that time, Liverpool have won the Premier League title and the Champions League, in addition to twice taking Man City to the death in a title race, and reaching 2 more Champions League finals, both of which they lost against Real Madrid, along with winning the FA Cup and a couple of League Cups. It's not quite a flawless record. There was a relegation at Mainz, on a tiny budget it should be said, one iffy season at Dortmund, and if you were being hypercritical, then last season at Liverpool. But overall, Klopp's mastery, without the biggest budget, and against some of the most formidable super clubs of the modern era, is pretty much second to none. Fifth really was the lowest that he could possibly have finished. Fourth, Alex Ferguson. I think Alex Ferguson is probably the best manager in this 7 and the best manager of all time. But of course, that's not the criteria of today's video. Restricting things solely to the 21st century, as this series does, and as I mentioned in the introduction, strips Sir Alex of some of his finest work, including promotion at St Mirren, 3 Scottish Premier Division titles, and a European Cup Winners' Cup against Real Madrid and Aberdeen, and the 14 years in which he established Manchester United as the best club in England and won a historic treble. That is exactly 2/3 of Ferguson's entire career in management and, if we are being honest, probably his most impressive accomplishments. One could argue, in isolation, that his trophies at Aberdeen, especially his European Cup Winners' Cup, was actually more impressive than any of his individual trophies at Manchester United. Indeed, I would argue just that. It speaks volumes that Ferguson even features in this 7, therefore, on only 33.3% of his resume, just 13 years of management, which is the least of anyone in this 7, and without some of his most special achievements. Nonetheless, in the 13 years post-2000 that Sir Alex managed in, he won some 19 trophies, including 8 Premier League titles, despite the rise of 2 financial superpowers during that time, in Chelsea and Man City, and a UEFA Champions League, which most likely would have been 2 or even 3, were it not for arguably the greatest club side of all time, beating him in 2 finals. I said Ferguson's greatest accomplishments in isolation may have come at Aberdeen, but what made him so unique was his longevity and his ability to refresh and rebuild a squad time and time again, maintaining standards, motivation, and most importantly, results. In that respect, the 2000s and early 2010s constituted peak Ferguson, as the likes of David Beckham, Roy Keane, Ruud van Nistelrooy, and Cristiano Ronaldo all departed, yet Manchester United's standards never wavered. Between 2000 and 2013, and indeed throughout the entire Premier League era, Ferguson never finished lower than 3rd in the Premier League table, and he only finished that low twice. It is uncharted territory for him therefore, but on the balance of things, I think that 4th is about right in this 7. 3rd, Carlo Ancelotti. I can only assume that it's just an English thing, based upon the relentless brilliance of Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola on these shores in recent years, and the fact that Carlo Ancelotti has only managed here for about 3.5 years, with Chelsea and Everton, but I do find it unusual how often he is overlooked when it comes to discussions about the best managers in the world. That is a little bit strange given Ancelotti's experience, the size of his trophy cabinet, and the fact that he is the most successful manager in the history of both the Champions League and European competitions as a whole. In terms of this 7, only one of Ancelotti's 27 trophies in total fall outside of our remit, and that is quite possibly the least significant of them all, an Intertoto Cup with Juventus back in 1999. In 2001, Ancelotti landed the AC Milan job, and it was there that his extraordinary success in management began. Though the Rossoneri only won 1 Scudetto during Ancelotti's 7.5 seasons at the helm, they reached 3 Champions League finals, winning 2 of them, and in the one that they lost, they were 3-0 up at half-time. At Chelsea, Ancelotti won a Premier League and an FA Cup double in his debut campaign, but that still wasn't enough to keep him in the job after the Blues finished 2nd, behind Manchester United, in his 2nd season. Then came PSG, where Ancelotti won the club their first Ligue 1 title in almost 20 years, fueled of course by a fresh injection of Qatari state cash. Real Madrid followed, where Ancelotti won a 3rd Champions League, followed by 14 months at Bayern Munich, where Ancelotti inevitably won a Bundesliga title. Trophies were harder to come by at Napoli and Everton, also somewhat inevitably. There was 2nd place finish in Naples and 10th on Merseyside in his only full seasons at either club, certainly weren't bad going by both teams' recent standards. And most recently, since 2021, Ancelotti has been back at Real Madrid, where he has won a La Liga title and yet another Champions League, and could yet win both again this season, with the first of those basically already being guaranteed. Ancelotti is a bit of a throwback in modern management, in the sense that he tends not to micromanage or be hyper-structured, providing a looser framework for his incredibly gifted players to go out and express themselves. Having been basically announced as the next Brazil boss at one stage, Ancelotti penned a new deal with Los Blancos in December, which will keep him in the Spanish capital until 2026. Second, Jose Mourinho. To say that he is still only 61 years old, which is hardly fossilised in managerial terms, or any terms I should add, for any sexagenarians who may be watching, it is fairly extraordinary the degree to which Jose Mourinho's stock has fallen, and not just over the last couple of seasons, but really over the last 8 or 9 years now. We'll come to that, because it probably stops Mourinho from taking top spot, but we'll start with why he still features in second. For a start, Mourinho's managerial career began at Benfica in the year 2000, meaning his entire career in management falls perfectly within our purview. So, that always helps. Next up, Mourinho was almost immediately successful, and immensely successful at that. In his first season at Porto, which was only a half season no less, he won a treble. The Portuguese Primeira Liga, the Taça de Portugal, and the UEFA Cup. The year that followed, he won the Primeira Liga title again and, in what remains his greatest achievement, in my view at least, the UEFA Champions League. In the summer of 2004, Mourinho's stock couldn't have been any higher, and Roman Abramovich chose him as the man to carry the Blues into a brave new era, aided, of course, by the most intense spending spree in the history of football up to that point. Investment helps, of course, a lot, but Chelsea hadn't won a top-flight league title since 1955, and that was the only one that they'd ever won. In Mourinho's debut campaign, however, they won their second, conceding only 15 goals in the process, followed by a third the following season, and then a League Cup and FA Cup double. Next up, Mourinho joined Inter Milan, where he won 5 trophies in 2 seasons, including 2 Scudettos and a Champions League, overcoming Pep's Barcelona in their prime in the semi-finals. That's probably what convinced Real Madrid that Mourinho was the man to compete with that Barcelona team, and Mourinho managed to win the 2011-12 La Liga title against them in Madrid. Back at Chelsea, Mourinho won a second double in the 2014-15 season, the Premier League and the League Cup, but it would be fair to say that it has been largely downhill from there for Jose. There have still been some high points, an EFL Cup and a Europa League double at Man United, and a Conference League at Roma, but it is 1 or 2 levels below where Mourinho once was. From untouchable at Porto and Inter to being sacked at Spurs and Roma is some come down, and in some ways, it's difficult to know where Mourinho goes next, or to have any faith, in fact, that he will return to the heights that he set between the beginning of the 2000s and the mid-2010s. Nonetheless, Mourinho's body of work over those 15, 16 or maybe 17 years, the relentlessness of his trophy winning, even since tailing off, including titles in the biggest competitions of them all during the 21st century, well, that is enough to earn him a silver medal in my book. 0. Honourable mentions. Just before we come to top spot, which I would imagine is quite predictable by this stage, but who knows, maybe you've all had a brain fart and are on tenterhooks, there is still time for the small matter of the honourable mentions. The likes of Luis Enrique, Louis van Gaal, Luciano Spalletti, Rafa Benitez, Massimo Allegri, Didier Deschamps, Luis Felipe Scolari, Ottmar Hitzfeld, Fabio Capello, Claudio Ranieri, Zinedine Zidane, Ernesto Valverde, Unai Emery, Marcello Lippi, Maurizio Pochettino, Vicente Del Bosque, Joachim Löw, and Jupp Heynckes all made my shortlist, among others. Meanwhile, the man who perhaps came closest to featuring was actually Antonio Conte. Conte won 3 straight Serie A titles with Juventus, comfortably won a Premier League title, followed by an FA Cup at Chelsea, and won another Serie A title in the 2020-21 season with Inter Milan. That's not enough to edge him past Diego Simeone in 7th, but it did earn him, along with 2 or 3 others, a little asterisk next to his name in my shortlist. And now, for your very predictable top spot. First, Alan Pardew. Yes, just as you all anticipated. the 2011-12 Premier League and LMA Manager of the Season, ahead of Arsene Wenger, Alex Ferguson and Roberto Mancini no less. Alan Pardew is a man who was so gifted as a coach that Mike Ashley once offered him an 8-year contract. Not just a great manager, but also a passionate dancer and MMA fan. Nah, I'm just kidding. First, Pep Guardiola. A man who is much less familiar with a headbutt or performing the cha-cha slide, despite having been to Wembley far more times than good old Al, Pep Guardiola has, nonetheless, some would argue, achieved more within the game. Guardiola got the top job at Barcelona after just a single season in charge of the Barca B team, and contrary to popular opinion, he didn't inherit some kind of all-conquering super team that were bound to win everything in the seasons that followed. In actual fact, Barca had finished third the previous season, 18 points behind Real Madrid and 10 points behind Villarreal. Of course, they still had some brilliant players, but Lionel Messi had only just turned 21, and though it was clear that he was a special talent, it wasn't necessarily a given that he would become one of the greatest players of all time. In Guardiola's first summer in charge, he took the controversial and bold decision to let go of fan favourites like Deco and most notably Ronaldinho, who made way for young defenders like Dani Alves and Gerard Piqué. Pep's first season heralded a La Liga title, with Barcelona's second highest ever points tally, a huge turnaround from the previous season. Barca didn't just win the league though, they won their first ever European treble, and the following year, they lost just one game all season, amassing an enormous record-breaking 99 points. Another La Liga and Champions League double followed in 2010-11, before Guardiola took a one-year sabbatical in New York. Back in the game with Bayern Munich, Guardiola won 3 Bundesliga titles in 3 seasons, with a ridiculous 75% win percentage in Bavaria, even higher than his success rate at Barca. Then came Manchester City in 2016, where Guardiola's debut campaign was the most challenging of his career, and by that, I mean he finished third and didn't win anything. Since then, however, the citizens have been relentless. Over the last 6 seasons, Guardiola has won 5 Premier League titles, including a domestic quadruple, a record-breaking points tally of 100, and a European treble last season. Age 53, Guardiola is already the 4th most successful manager of all time in terms of trophies, only 14 behind the record holder Alex Ferguson, and by far the most successful since 2000. In fact, if there is one thing that counts against Guardiola, other than the argument that he has never taken a job at a club that wasn't already among the favourites to win everything, it is that his managerial journey began in the late 2000s, whereas Klopp, Mourinho and Ancelotti, for example, have all managed throughout basically the entirety of the millennium. Guardiola has more than made up for lost time though, not only maintaining a level of consistency and methodical success that is without peer, but also having a huge influence upon style, systems and, fundamentally, just the way in which the sport is played. Ultimately, whatever you think of the jobs Guardiola has, or perhaps more importantly hasn't taken, and whether he could be as effective with lesser players or a smaller budget, the reality is that it's almost impossible not to put him in top spot. Goalkeeper, Gianluigi Buffon. A shoo-in based upon the stated criteria of the quality and quantity of a player's performances. Since 2000, Gianluigi Buffon became the world's most expensive goalkeeper when he joined Juventus from Parma in 2001, and he only retired in 2023, back at Parma in fact, at the grand old age of 45. The most capped Italian and the most capped goalkeeper of all time, having represented his country 176 times, Buffon won the World Cup with Italy in 2006. That earns him a second-place finish in Ballon d'Or voting that year, which is the closest any keeper has come since Lev Yashin's crown all the way back in 1963. At club level, Buffon made 975 appearances, about 850 of them post-2000, and 685 of them coming at Juventus. Buffon won 10 Serie A titles in Turin, not counting the 2 that Juve was stripped of due to the Calciopoli scandal, as well as losing 3 Champions League finals. That was the only trophy Buffon missed out on, whereas his rivals Manuel Neuer and Iker Casillas both won it. I often say Buffon didn't have the sweeping or distribution skills of Neuer, the reflexes of Casillas, or the sheer intimidation and presence of someone like Oliver Kahn, but as an all-round package, he was the pick of the bunch. A man with almost no outstanding weaknesses, Buffon's positioning and anticipation were perhaps his finest attributes, allowing him to play well into his 40s. He gets us started, and it is hard to imagine a more solid foundation upon which to build a team. Right back, Philipp Lahm. The greatest right back of the 21st century, a bit like Gianluigi Buffon, Philipp Lahm was a man almost without fault. Frequently played at left back during his early years and in midfield during the autumn of his playing days, Lahm's combination of energy, awareness and technique meant that he could play almost anywhere. But it was at right back that he played most of his football. Pep Guardiola described Lahm as the most intelligent player that he ever coached, this coming from a man who managed the likes of Xavi, Busquets and Iniesta. Nicknamed the Magic Dwarf in Munich, where he won it all, Lahm made 517 appearances for Bayern, all post-2000, who were his only club other than 2 seasons on loan at Stuttgart. On the international stage, Lahm was capped 113 times and captained Germany to success at the 2014 World Cup. He retired from the international stage following the World Cup in Brazil, aged 30, and from football as a whole in 2017, aged 33, so relatively young in both instances. But his body of work is still large and impressive enough for him to make a 21st century greatest 11. Centre-back, Sergio Ramos. A man who divides opinion, for somewhat inevitable reasons. No one can deny Sergio Ramos' talents or what he has achieved in the game. In fact, Ramos is one of the 20 most decorated footballers of all time and the 5th most decorated defender, having won both the World Cup and the Euros twice with Spain, a total of 7 league titles in France and Spain, 4 UEFA Champions Leagues, and 14 other trophies. On an individual level, Ramos has made the FIFA World 11 times, a tally which is bettered only by Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, and he featured every single year between 2011 and 2020. Not always the most level-headed, it would be fair to say, Ramos has also received the most red cards of any player in Europe's top 5 leagues post-2000, 29 in total, but he's also scored a fairly remarkable 141 goals from centre-back, most of them either headers or penalties. Ramos wasn't or isn't just a brilliant athlete, leader and front foot defender, he also had a useful habit of reserving his best performances and most clutch moments for the biggest of occasions. One of few footballers to have made more than 1,000 senior appearances and counting, including an incredible and record-breaking 180 caps for Spain, all of them coming post-2000, Ramos hits every single aspect of the criteria and was an inevitable inclusion. Centre-back, Carlos Puyol. The same centre-back pairing that won Euro 2008 and the 2010 World Cup together forms the basis of our greatest 11 since 2000. Well, that's not strictly true. Ramos actually played at right-back in 2008 and 2010, only moving to centre-back at Euro 2012, which Puyol missed due to a knee injury. But you get the idea, they both played a lot of games for Spain and were wildly successful. Interestingly, Puyol's success only arrived in his mid to late 20s. He didn't win any trophy, of any description, until the age of 27, when Barcelona won the 2005 La Liga title. And yet, by the time that he retired in 2014, age 36, Puyol was one of the most decorated defenders of all time, having won 6 La Liga titles, the World Cup and the Euros, the Champions League on 3 occasions, and 9 other trophies. The leader that Barcelona needed in a team full of diminutive technical marvels, Puyol injected some much-needed nastiness and nous, and Barca are always a far better team with him than without. Left back, Ashley Cole. Actually quite a straightforward decision, owing to the fact that Paolo Maldini turned 32 in 2000, and as good as he was going forward, Marcelo was never in the same league as Cole defensively, dictates that Ashley Cole walks into this 11 without any great trouble. Though he perhaps didn't always endear himself with football fans as a whole, everyone, and especially his fellow professionals, had immense respect for Cole's abilities on the pitch. One of few players who managed to repeatedly pocket prime Cristiano Ronaldo, Cole was a left-back who could do it all. At Arsenal, he was immensely attacking and adventurous, playing a starring role in Arsene Wenger's invincible team, whereas at Chelsea, he committed forward with a little bit less frequency under Jose Mourinho, but was even more formidable defensively. England's most capped fullback of all time, and a rare player from the so-called golden generation, who always brought his club form onto the international stage, Cole completes our ironclad backline. Defensive midfield. Sergio Busquets. There have been a myriad of outstanding defence midfielders during the 21st century, from N'Golo Kante to Xabi Alonso, and yet Sergio Busquets still somehow manages to stand out head and shoulders above them all. I was always told, and still hold it to be true, that the best footballers, the truly great ones, can do in 1 or 2 touches what everyone else can only do in 3 or 4. It is that speed in transition and efficiency that allows for elite ball retention, dictating the speed and tempo of a game, and denying teams the ability to reset or reorganise when your team breaks. In that respect, as one of the most efficient footballers that the game has ever seen, Sergio Busquets is one of the greatest pivots of all time. It was fitting, therefore, that he should play that role in one of the greatest teams of all time, racking up over 700 appearances for Barcelona and winning 143 caps for Spain. The winner of some 35 trophies, including 9 La Liga titles, 3 Champions Leagues, and both the Euros and the World Cup, Busquets now plays for Inter Miami in Major League Soccer at the age of 35. Central midfield. Xavi. It is a little bit absurd that only 7 players into this 11, Xavi is already the 4th former Spanish international and the 3rd player who is best associated with Barcelona. It is illustrative of what a ridiculous team Barcelona had, particularly during those 4 years under Pep Guardiola, where they were frequently unplayable and swept the floor with some of the best teams in the world. Xavi was the conductor in that side and, outside of Lionel Messi, Barcelona's most important player. A constant outlet who was almost never neutralised even when world-class players were tasked solely with doing just that, Xavi didn't just almost never sacrifice possession, like Busquets, he was also incredibly efficient in possession and even more creative. He saw things at ground level that didn't even appear to be visible from the stands or the perspective of television cameras, and crucially, he had the ability to execute the pictures in his mind. In a career spanning more than 20 years, almost all of it post-2000, and the vast majority of it spent with Barcelona, Xavi made over 1,000 appearances at club and international level, winning, you guessed it, both the World Cup and 2 Euros, 8 La Liga titles, 4 Champions Leagues, and 18 other trophies. Right wing, Lionel Messi. The greatest footballer of the 21st century, in my eyes, and one of the 2 greatest, if not simply the greatest of all time, it seems a little bit needless to justify Lionel Messi's inclusion in this 11, so I won't spend long on him. In a career which has so far spanned 20 years, Messi has, so far, scored 826 goals and made 363 assists in 1,052 appearances, averaging a goal contribution every 73 minutes. That's ridiculous. At his most productive, Messi of course scored 91 goals and made 22 assists in 69 appearances in the calendar year of 2012, averaging a goal contribution once every 53 minutes. Though one could argue that he actually played his very best football and was at his most influential when he dropped deeper at Barcelona and still put up ridiculous numbers despite being the chief creator and playmaker in that side. The greatest passer, dribbler, and goal scorer of the 21st century, Messi is quite obviously the greatest right winger since 2000 and is one of the 2 most obvious inclusions in this 11. Attacking midfield, Ronaldinho. Messi's mentor during his early years at Barcelona, Ronaldinho may have burnt out much earlier than the Argentine, and make no mistake, his spot in this 11 was nowhere near as guaranteed, but I still don't think that there has been a better attacking midfielder, based upon the quality and quantity of their performances post-2000, than Ronaldinho. The man who made, or at least helped me and many other people of my generation fall in love with football, Ronaldinho typified Brazil's O Joga Bonito style. He played football with a smile on his face, and he implanted a smile on the face of all those fortunate enough to have been able to watch him. Having broken through at Grêmio at the end of the 1990s, virtually Ronaldinho's entire career came post-2000. Outstanding for PSG, but at his best at Barcelona, Ronaldinho was one of the two best players in the world throughout his first 4 seasons in Catalonia. Even after his focus waned, having achieved everything that he could ever have dreamt of, from winning the World Cup to the Champions League and the Ballon d'Or, Ronaldinho still had a sensational 2009-10 season at AC Milan, scoring 15 goals and making 19 assists, as well as enjoying tremendous seasons with both Flamengo and Atletico Mineiro. Left wing, Cristiano Ronaldo. Again, it probably doesn't require too much of an explanation. The only doubt about Cristiano Ronaldo's inclusion in this 11 is whether it would be on the left wing or up front. Ronaldo played more games on the left, hence he was included in the left wing video in this series, which he inevitably topped, and so here he is in this 11. The highest scoring footballer of the 21st century, Ronaldo has scored 879 goals in total across 1,212 appearances, as well as making 249 assists, giving him a goal contribution once every 88 minutes over a career spanning 22 years. The winner of everything except for the World Cup, arguably the greatest Champions League player of all time, and both the most capped and the highest scoring men's footballer in history, Ronaldo will be relieved to have Ashley Cole in behind him in this 11, not only because he's good enough that he doesn't have to track back, but also because it means that he won't be coming up against him. Centre forward, Luis Suarez. The 6th former Barcelona player in this 11, so that is over half of the team, the 4 greatest centre-forwards of the 21st century, Luis Suarez, Robert Lewandowski, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Thierry Henry, all at some stage played for Barcelona. There is little to split them, as we went through in that centre-forward video, but very narrowly, it's Suarez who came out on top. Not just a brilliant goal scorer, and the most prolific of the lot at his peak, ending Messi and Ronaldo's duopoly over the European Golden Shoe, when he scored 59 goals in 53 games in the 2015-16 season, Suarez was also a tenacious, and at times fairly violent competitor, who illustrated an ability to star as 1/3 of the greatest front three of the modern era in a super team, but also to inspire a fairly average team to the verge of greatness at Liverpool through his own sheer willpower and ability. Between them, our front three, Messi, Ronaldo and Suarez, have scored 2,268 goals, and all 3 of them are still playing. So that is the 11, meanwhile the rest of the 23-man squad, based upon the players who finished 2nd in each position, or 2nd and 3rd in terms of goalkeepers, and 3rd and 4th place centre-backs, reads Manuel Neuer, Iker Casillas, Dani Alves, Alessandro Nesta, Thiago Silva, Marcelo, Casemiro, Andres Iniesta, Kaká, Mohamed Salah, Neymar, and Robert Lewandowski. Now, just for fun, here is the 11 that I would pick, based upon every player at their peak post-2000, and with the aim of creating an actually functional, effective team. Manuel Neuer starts in goal. I think his absolute peak was probably the most formidable of anyone's, and he had better distribution than Buffon or Casillas. I'm sticking with Lahm at right back, even though I was tempted to pick Dani Alves due to the incredible chemistry that he had with Messi on that right flank, but Lahm isn't a convicted sex offender, so that's a big plus beside his name as far as I'm concerned. Alessandro Nesta, who I think, in terms of his ability, was the greatest centre-back of the 21st century, partners Virgil van Dijk, who is so formidable and complete at his best. Honestly, prime Nesta and Van Dijk would be borderline impenetrable, and even if you get past them, you've got peak Neuer to contend with. I've picked early 2000s Maldini narrowly ahead of Ashley Cole for his leadership and class, but that one was a close call. Busquets and Xavi both retain their places, but I've picked Zinedine Zidane alongside the Catalans. Messi and Ronaldo obviously both start, but between them is another Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima, or the Brazilian Ronaldo, who is punished in the quality and quantity of performances post-2000 rankings by virtue of his finest form coming in the 90s and crippling injuries throughout the 2000s. But at his best, there was no one better this century, so he gets the nod for me. If you put those two teams side by side, obviously, I think that my organically selected team with everyone at their peak would win, but it would be an extremely close game, which I think is testament to the fact that the positional series produced a fairly balanced team. Both teams, it should be said, would be managed by Pep Guardiola, who topped the managerial 7, and even if your one critique of Guardiola is that he has only ever succeeded with wonderful players, which is true, I mean, that is almost a strength rather than a weakness when it comes to coaching this team. As for the greatest since 2000 versus the greatest 11 of all time, well, I dug that bad boy out from 6 years ago, and it looks like this. Lev Yashin, Djalma Santos, Franz Beckenbauer, John Charles, Paolo Maldini, Jose Andrade, Diego Maradona, Garrincha, Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi and Pelé. With the benefit of hindsight, even though John Charles was basically the complete footballer, I would probably have Franco Baresi there instead of him, by virtue of Baresi spending his entire career at centre-back, though it's only a minor alteration. The post-2000 team definitely has better balance, with a pivot and a central midfielder, whereas the all-time team would leave Jose Andrade incredibly exposed, but the star power of Garrincha, Maradona, Ronaldo, Messi and Pelé is pretty hilarious. I suspect that would be too much for anyone, even the considerable talents of Lahm, Ramos, Puyol and Cole to suppress, but I don't think that the modern greats would shame themselves in any way. Anyway, that is it for today's video, which is effectively the final installment of this series. After this, as I did with my greatest Premier League players and 11 of the Premier League era series, I will make a compilation of all of the different videos and upload it, partly so that you've got everything in one video for convenience, and partly because the Premier League one has 1.5 million views and counting, which is pretty good going. Thank you all very much, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video. I obviously sincerely hope that was the case. Let me know your thoughts on my team and this entire series down below in the comments. Any alterations that you might make or just abuse that you fancy hurling at me. And of course, it goes without saying, make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, not just for this channel, HITC Sevens, but also importantly my second channel, Alfie Potts Armour, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram or Threads via the username at HITC Sevens on all three, should you wish to do so, and all of those links plus a whole lot more should be down in the video description below. Cheers.